Okay, we're live.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. President Arducci, you can call the meeting to order.
Thank you very much. I believe the time is 10:05. We'll call the meeting to order. Welcome everybody and welcome by Zoom. And could we have a roll call?
Yes, Member Baker.
Present.
Member Broussard.
Present.
Member Burton.
Here.
Dr. Kaur.
Present.
Superintendent Hoffman.
Here.
Member Kay.
Present.
Dr. Mack.
Here.
Dr. Robbins.
Present.
Member Ruiz.
Present.
Member Wellborn.
Here.
President Narducci.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I know we have a lot on our agenda today, but I just want to thank everybody for making time to actually participate in the Zoom board meeting, as well as our board members that have taken time to review and get ready for everything. We also appreciate everything that's going on to keep our education system going in the state by Superintendent Hoffman, the governor's office, all of our teachers, superintendents, and parents at this time, because we do have a lot of students working virtually and will continue to do so for a while. So with that, I do not have a further president's report, so I can turn this over to Superintendent Hoffman for her report.
Thank you, President Narducci. Good morning, board members, and good morning to everyone. I want to first take a moment to acknowledge the different native lands that we occupy today. My own home sits on the O'odham and Hohokam lands. So my first announcement is that after many conversations and really taking the time to get to know ADE since I started my tenure almost 2 years ago now, I am thrilled to announce that we have a new vision statement for ADE. And to set the direction and better guide our strategic planning, our new agency vision statement is equity for all students to achieve their full potential. To me, this really puts equity and our students at the forefront of all the work that we do here in ADE. And along those lines, we have another exciting announcement that at the beginning of this month, we launched a new website for ADE. I strongly encourage you to all check it out. This has been a priority for us since the beginning to modernize our website, and we know how frequently it is accessed by educators, school leaders, and families. The website is still the same, azed.gov, and we're very grateful for receiving input from both external and internal users to make sure that we're prioritizing the user experience, that we wanted to make sure it had good functionality across devices and just a much easier access that you can find what you're looking for. We're also grateful for collaborating with the web developers and ADOA for making this possible. And so just to highlight a couple of the new features that you'll see when you go to our website. So some of these new items include having a new way to search events. So ADE offers tons of professional development across so many different areas, and now they're all in one place where you can search by topic and you can browse through them. And so it's a really nice way to see all the different types of professional development and webinars that we offer. Another new feature is an improved search functionality. So you can more easily search by program area or keyword. One of our more trafficked areas was the academic standards section. And so this has been updated where you can find anything related to the academic standards and for students from birth through high school graduation. And that's also where you can find our new social emotional learning competencies, which I mentioned last time. Another area that we ramped up or beefed up a bit was the educator certification and career section. So you can go to that area to find information about becoming an educator, how to renew your certification, or how to grow in the profession. And then the last section I'll mention is an area for school and student data, where you can find frequently accessed links and resources and forms, data sets from across the agency all in one place. So we hope that you also have a better user experience on our new website, and please let us know if there's an area where you see a need for improvement, because we are still making those tweaks to make sure that it's the best user experience for everyone. Another announcement is that last week we convened the first meeting of our new Equitable and Effective Schools Task Force. Now that our schools are settling into a new and vastly different learning environment, this task force will examine what is working and what is not working, and how ADE can be most effective in supporting our schools. This task force is to help us prioritize, and we want to make sure that we're keeping our eyes open to the new opportunities and innovation that is possible in this new teaching and learning environment. Another area I'd like to highlight is that earlier this summer, ADE hired this is for a brand new position to the agency, a new post-secondary coordinator to help our students in their transition out of the P-12 system. And despite COVID-19, our new coordinator, Andrea Glenn, has hit the ground running, and she has formed critical partnerships with our post-secondary organizations in the state here locally, like Achieve 60 and College Success Arizona. And so as we begin this new school year, our big post-secondary push is to encourage eligible students to apply for the FAFSA. On September 30th, ADE, along with the Governor's Office and College Success Arizona, will host a statewide FAFSA kickoff to launch this new FAFSA season. This partnership and event will showcase the best practices and resources, and also increase the visibility of our commitment and support to meeting our new FAFSA state goal, which was set by the State Commission's office this year. The registration for this event has closed, but we do plan to host more events like this in the future. Also, Andrea has been meeting with and beginning to partner with our tribal colleges to support tribal dual enrollment programs with ASCAN and to strengthen our partnerships and programs that we offer together. And another note, we, in order to increase transparency around school reopenings, ADE has begun to track the LEA's reopening and where they're at. And so as of last week, according to the Department of Health Services, 14 of the 15 counties have met the benchmarks for hybrid or in-person learning, but each school's plan may look different. And so we are working closely with our county superintendents and the Charter Association to gather data on reopening. So this is basically showing is an LEA or a school, are they in person, are they hybrid, or are they doing distance learning still? So this type of this is just basic information, but we wanted to have a statewide tracker, and this can be found on our website's COVID-19 resources page. If you look there and you notice that your county or your school is missing, we are still working on collecting those data, and so just know that it's not complete yet, but we're doing the best we can to fill in the gaps. And finally, I would like to provide an update on the migration of the ESA accounts from Bank of America prepaid debit card system to the new payment processing platform, ClassWallet. Since January, ADE has been transitioning accounts from the old system to ClassWallet in phases. And as of last week, a majority of the accounts, which is over 6,000 accounts, have been transitioned to ClassWallet. And the new platform is largely meeting the needs of these families who primarily use their ESA account to pay for tuition and other costs associated with attending a private school. And as we've worked to create this entirely new system and to meet the unique needs of each family, the ESA team is continuing to work with families and vendors to address problems as quickly as possible. As the accounts have been transitioned to the new platform, ADE has been working closely with partners at the Treasurer's Office, the State Board of Education, ESA families, and ClassWallet. Through discussion and feedback with these partners, ADE has identified some outstanding gaps in the current functionality necessary to meet the needs of families that utilize their ESA to primarily homeschool their children and have the most variations in their spending. To ensure that there is no disruption to the education of students, the department has decided to not currently transition the remaining 2,700 accounts of families that are currently served exclusively through the ESA debit card until July 1st, 2021. ADE will continue to work with stakeholders and ClassWallet to enhance functionality and continue to expand the number of vendors in the marketplace. ADE notified affected families and stakeholders of this change. Last week on Friday, I sent a letter along with our director, Carla Escobar, to notify families of this new update. ADE is committed to, and I am committed to supporting solutions that address the needs of all stakeholders involved. And I want to personally thank all of the ESA families for their patience as we work through these issues. And thank you again to the State Board for partnering with us as well. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Superintendent Hoffman. Lots going on. Surely appreciate all you're doing.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Next on the agenda item is turn it over to Director Williams, but I just want to say thank you, Alicia, to you and your staff for doing such a great job and keeping us all organized during all this process and all the work you're doing, not only behind the scenes, but in front of the scenes for all of us. And turn it over to you, Alicia.
Thank you, President Narducci. President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. My report today will be very brief. Just letting you know that board staff did open the Arizona Online Instruction application window. This window was open in the normal process of AOI applications. So any applications that we receive now until the end of October will be put before the board for implementation in the 21-22 school year. President Narducci, that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Director Williams. We'll move on to item number 2 on the agenda. And item number 2 on the agenda is call to the public. Director Williams.
Yes.
Okay. Can I go on and just, did you want to say anything or do you want me to go on?
No, there's 2 individuals signed up for this call to the public. Did you want to read the?
Yes. Yeah. Because of the number of requests to speak for this meeting, I'd like to limit the speakers to 2 minutes because we have plenty of speakers coming later on. And then also throughout the meeting, and this is for everybody who is on the call that will be making public comment and also to our board members. But this is a time for members of the public to comment on items on the consent portion of our agenda and items not on today's agenda. For those who are speaking today, please remember to be respectful in your words and keep comments within the 2-minute time limit. There is going to be a timer that you'll be able to see, and we will request that when you hit the 2-minute timer that we conclude. And Director Williams, do we have any requests to speak? You just mentioned 2.
Yes, we have 2. First up, we have William Damian, followed by Colin Leisure Pool.
Thank you. We can proceed.
We do not have attendance from Mr. Damian or Mr. Leisure Pool.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica. President Narducci, did you want to give them a few more minutes or do you just want to move on to the consent agenda?
Are they given a time to appear, or they just were they supposed to be available at 10?
Correct.
Okay, and their topics are going to be American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning. And did they provide any written comments or just going to provide oral?
They just submitted registrations to provide verbal comments to the board. No written from these 2 gentlemen.
Right. Why don't we give them another minute or so, and then we'll proceed. We'll go. I think it's 10:19. Let's go to 10:20,
Okay.
and then we'll just go from there. And then I won't move on to item 3 just yet. And I understand that we have probably 15 to 16 comments coming later.
President Narducci, we have 14 individuals registered to speak for call to the public number 4, and we have 2 individuals registered to speak for call to the public number 9.
Okay. All right. Just give me another. It's 10:20. And I assume that we can't text them and ask them to see if they want to participate, huh? All right, we're going to move on.
Okay.
All right, we'll move on to item number 3. And I guess if they could comment next meeting if they wish.
Yes.
Item number 3, go ahead. Anything? Okay. Item number 3 is the consent agenda. It's my understanding that we are going to pull item number 3E at the request of Member Welborn for discussion and a brief presentation by the department. Are there any other items that our board members wish to have pulled from the agenda? Consent agenda. Okay, hearing none. Do I have a motion to approve items 3A through 3D and item 3F?
So moved.
I have a motion by Dr. Cord. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Who
Dr.
was
Mack.
okay, second by Dr. Mack. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, passes. And then let's have the discussion regarding item 3E. Alicia.
President Arducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. Item 3E is the approval of the Arizona Industry Credential Incentive Program processes. And we have Kathy Raymond from the Department of Education who will provide a brief presentation. Jessica, if you could please pull up the PowerPoint presentation, and Kathy, if you could please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Kathy.
Good morning. An overview of the Arizona industry.
Kathy, we cannot hear you. Jessica, do we have Kate Wright on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Kate, can you take over for Kathy while she figures out her sound, please?
I can. Is there a way for someone, can she call in? I think she does have trouble using Zoom from her computer for the sound.
Yes, when you log into Zoom, it will allow for the option for you to call in using a phone. So she'll have to log out of Zoom, log back in, and then dial in the number.
Okay, thank you for letting her hear that. So Kathy, I'm going to go ahead and I'll do my best. And then if you can call in, that might be your best bet.
Thank you, Kate. And
Thank
just ask Jessica to advance the slide when you'd like to move to the next slide.
Okay, I appreciate that. So good morning. Jessica, you can and move the slide for me, please. I appreciate that. So the purpose of this agenda item this morning is due to legislatively the requirement of having CTE gain approval from the State Board of Education for their process for the governor's incentive grant. So these pieces we will describe this morning: the format of the online application, the submission of data, the reporting requirements, including submission of data through the designated online portal, and then the audit procedures for the Arizona Industry Credentials Incentive Program. You may advance the slide. Thank you. So for this morning, as I mentioned, ADE-CTE has prepared for the board's review and approval the online application, the process for the submission of data by our LEAs, the reporting requirements which are connected to the data portal, and the audit procedures that the Department of Ed will follow in ensuring that the funds were spent appropriately. Next slide, please. So this next slide speaks to actually 3 of those requirements: the application, the data submission, and the reporting. So beginning with the 2019 graduates and continuing through 2022, the application, the process for submitting data and reporting are all completed through the use of a spreadsheet developed to capture the required student information for the Arizona Industry Credential Incentive Program. The reason that it is all for the next 3 years being captured in this way is to allow for a consistent process for cumulative data following students from grade 9 to graduation. Next slide, please. Next slide. Is there another slide? Thank you. So the submission of data spreadsheet format. Oh, you can go back one for me, please. Thank you. We'll look at the spreadsheet in just a second. This spreadsheet was created with CTE in alignment with work with our IT department as well. This format is being used, as I mentioned, for the next 4 years to gather data as districts may not have reported all the credential attainment for all students. Eventually, this process will be automated within the CTE data portal. This data portal is something that the CTE program has been working very diligently on with our IT department over the last 2 years. It is ultimately, I think, the preferred method, but in the time where we're trying to make sure that the data is accurate and that there's a consistent means for LEAs to submit data, the spreadsheet process that I'll show you an example of on the next slide has been deemed to be the best process. Once we can use the data portal for 4 consecutive years of credential data, it will be collected that way. So it's important that for the 4 years, data is collected in the same method, which is why, again, there's a lag in using the data portal. All entities with approved CTE programs should ensure that their data is also being input into this online application, which is the spreadsheet. And we have 2 subgrantee types, secondary and CTED districts. So entities within the Arizona Department of Ed approved for career and technical programs will report only students earning a credential for a course they administer. Our CTEDs will complete their own spreadsheet for submission to students who have earned credentials through them. Kathy, are you with us?
I am with you now. I apologize for that. Zoom is my nemesis.
We know that you were having trouble, so that's perfect. I will stop speaking and let you pick up right where I am.
Okay, great. If you want to advance to the next slide, please. So this is an example of the spreadsheet that we sent to districts. We sent it to every district and every CTED and charter that have approved CTE programs. And if you can see there, it's the entity name, student unique ID, the student last name, first name, their grade level, the program name that they're in, and there's a drop down. So they select the program, then they have to select the actual course they received the credential in, and then the number of the name of the credential. For that program, there's only a certain number or listed credentials that were approved and when they earned it. So this, they will submit to us. We cross-check it. We look for duplications. We crosswalk it with the CTEDs. So next slide, please. So as was mentioned, approved credentials will follow the student from their 9th grade year into graduation, even if that credential or program is eventually removed from the sectors. And this was, as mentioned, because we don't have that 4-year data collection that we would need for students. Participating entities must maintain evidence, documentation for each student earning a credential, and recipients of incentive funding should anticipate a possible on-site monitoring visit from the ADE CTE to validate the data submissions. Next slide. Next slide. The online data portal developed for documenting attainment of industry credentials does not have the capacity to capture credentials attained before 2020. So entities are asked to begin entering credential attainment earned by every CTE student during school year 2020, and this will start building that data capacity for the future. Next slide. So on the budget and narrative form, once they get their allocation, Then they'll be required to fill out a budget and a narrative and send it to us. Actually, since this PowerPoint was developed, we are able to put it into grants management. So districts will go into grants management and have this, the budget and their narrative submitted that way. CTE will then review this form, and if additional information is needed, we will ask clarifying questions. So the steps to fill out, they have to list their allocated amount. By object code, list the dollar amount they plan on expending, and respond to 5 program narrative questions giving insight to their entity's initial strategy for spending these funds for the approved sector programs. And there are only 5 ways, 5 activities that they can use these funds for. Next slide. So the final expenditure form, that will be a final report that they will give us. And it's the same as a budget narrative, but instead accounts for actual spending. The reason a final expenditure form is required is because an entity might deviate from their original plan. CTE needs to be sure all expenditures align with the permitted activities. So they'll list the allocation amount by object code, the dollar amount expended, and their final narrative on what they actually did with those activities. So all of this will be embedded into a grants process that they'll be able to go in and revise at any time. Next slide. So for on-site monitoring, this is an important piece that the governor's office wanted us to be sure to include when we started working with them on this program. So it was for us to hold the right to do on-site monitoring if we elect to do so. And that visit would be scheduled in advance to be sure all parties can be available. And during the monitoring, we'll validate the data submissions, review expenditure reports, review supporting documentation, such as copies of credentials earned, verify items that were purchased and be sure they align with permitted activities, and address any other issues or concerns that arise. And another thing to remember, a good reason why we put it into grants management was because these funds can carry over. They do not have to use all of them each year. So being in grants management, we'll be able to carry over for them better. Next slide. So in summary, ADE-CTE is requesting the state board's approval and using the online spreadsheet as the application for data submission and reporting requirements. ADE-CTE is requesting the state board's approval and using the online data portal to begin capturing cumulative data. And we are also requesting the state board's approval for the audit procedures for the Arizona Industry Credential Incentive Program. Next slide. Questions?
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
I have just a simple procedural question. You know, the districts are being asked to collect a lot of data for this, which is good and legitimate. I'm just wondering, since districts are also being required to capture a lot of data for college and career readiness, that includes a lot of the similar information, although on an individual student, well, it's also on an individual student basis. Was there any attempt, has there been any conversations about trying to coordinate some of that so that there can be some efficiencies in that data collection?
Yes, Member Baker, President Narducci, Member Baker, you are correct. That's within our CTE data portal. And we were just able to get that up and running in 2020. The award that was just given this summer was for the 19 graduates. So once we get those 4 years of data within our data system, it will be more streamlined. But because we have to go in and reprogram, if programs change within the incentive program, or we add or remove credentials, that's an ongoing process. But yes, you are correct. We are trying to get a system where everything will be reported in one. just as a note too, one of our new performance measures for Perkins is industry credential attainment. So the data portal will help us track all of these in one place.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
President Narducci,
Member Wilburn.
Superintendent Hoffman, and members of the board. Ms. Raymond, I have a question, and I apologize in advance if I'm revealing my lack of experience with the whole CTE program. But I was looking at the list of credentials that or certifications that are accepted. And these, I assume these are the certifications that will be used to qualify a school for the incentive. So for example, in the health sector, if someone is taking courses around the home health aid, can you explain to me in this example, how many courses a student would take in this topic, and what are the reasons why? And then the direct care worker, is that, if you can explain a little bit about, is that an exam or a final in the course versus what the OSHA 10 healthcare certification represents?
President Narducci, Member Wilburn, thank you for your question. I understand your concerns there. All of our programs are 2-year to 3-year programs that they're required. And 2 years in the program, make sure that a student is a concentrator. The list that was approved that we used for the 2019 grads were ones that had already been approved, and we couldn't change it midstream. So for the 20 grads, all those OSHA 10 healthcares are off, except the only 2 OSHA 10s on there for the whole list is the construction OSHA 10, which is specific to construction and has additional modules. And then for biomed and sports med, there are 10 additional modules for healthcare under those. So for home health aid, that is no longer available for the 20 grads. So some of those have been eliminated and reduced.
Okay, so my interpretation of that is that there was a decision made that the OSHA 10 healthcare was not going to be adequate to validate certification as a home health aid. Is that what you're telling me?
Correct. For most of them,
Yeah.
we do have some districts that still offer that as an additional one because some agencies will, and there's such a shortage of home health aides that they will use that OSHA 10 healthcare to accept employees.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, hearing none. Do I have a motion to approve item 3E?
So moved.
I have a motion by Member Welborn. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll go with the second from Cal. I think that was Cal.
Correct.
Thank you. So I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. It passes, and we'll move on to item number 4, which is
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Call to the public. This is the item for members of the public to comment on items that are on the general session of today's meeting. And again, just a reminder that for those speaking, the time limit is 2 minutes, and there will be a clock running. And please remember to be respectful with your words and your comments. And we will if you go a little bit over the 2, we'll allow that. But if you're going, 30 seconds over the 2 or so, we are going to need to cut you off so that we can move on. With that, I'll turn the time over to Alicia.
President Narducci, before we get into item 4, board staff was able to reach out to the 2 gentlemen who had signed up to speak for item number 2. Would you like me to move them to the end of item number 4, or would you like for our board staff to reach out to them and ask that they submit written comment for the October board meeting?
Let's move them to the end of 4. That'd be fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, for the board and public's reference, there was one written public comment received for this board meeting that is posted on Assembly. It's from an individual named Stephanie, and it's in regard to standardized testing, and that is uploaded into Assembly as a written public comment. First on the verbal public comment, we have Christine Emanuel, followed by April Adams. Christine?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Feel free to.
Okay, so hello, my name is Christine. I am an ESA parent. I would first like to thank the Arizona Department of Education for working with ESA families in regards to the stay of the Bank of America cards. It is a great first step, and I appreciate your willingness to listen to the needs of ESA families in the last week. I have one child on the Bank of America platform and one child on the Class Wallet platform. I have had some time to understand and use the Class Wallet platform. The best way to describe the Class Wallet platform at this point is that it is very restrictive. I have a curriculum that has been approved for purchase by ADE, and Class Wallet's platform restricts me from purchasing that curriculum. In Niehaus versus Huppenthal, the court states that monies are earmarked for a student's educational needs as a parent may deem fit. I am my child's parent. I deem this curriculum fit. ADE approved the curriculum, but with my child on the Class Wallet platform, I am in no way able to purchase it for him with the funds that are earmarked for his education. We need a solution for all families using an ESA. And at this point, it's unworkable for my child, as well as for many other children and parents. I want to reiterate that it's not the company itself that doesn't allow me to purchase the curriculum. It's simply the platform, which can definitely be molded into an option that works for ADE and for all ESA families. I appreciate all the work, all the hard work that goes on behind the scenes. Our ESA parents are working tirelessly, not only to educate their children, but also putting their heads together for solutions to make Class Wallet work. I am urging Arizona Department of Education to work directly with ESA parents from all categories who have more complex spending needs to mold a debit card option that will work for ESA families. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Next up, we have April Adams, followed by Kayla Feiden.
Hi, this is April Adams. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, April, go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, first of all, I want to thank the Arizona Department of Education and Superintendent Hoffman for extending the use of the Bank of America card for some ESA families until July. We really appreciate the flexibility that the department showed in allowing us that stay. So I do want to thank everyone for that. I was also excited to hear about the new vision statement that has been adopted by the Department of Education for the equity of all students to achieve their full potential. I think it's very important to point out that many of the students on the ESA are Arizona's most vulnerable students. And so the equity for those students to achieve their full potential is absolutely imperative. And the way to handle that is in order to give these kids sometimes more flexibility that we just are not seeing with Class Wallet. Again, we have issues. We have vendors that are choosing not to participate on the card, I mean, on the system. We have concerns about privacy. And finally, we have some concerns about the system being ADA compliant for our families that do qualify, that have parents with special needs. I would just like to again thank the Department of Education for giving us this extension that will allow us to spend some time working to get these issues fixed. And I would like to also ask Superintendent Hoffman to spend some time with the Empowered Arizona families, myself, Kayla, and Kathy Bolts, to meet with us so we can have more conversations, more in-depth conversations about how to make Class Wallet a workable system and how to make it better for both the department and the kids on the ESA.
Thank you, April. Next up, we have Kayla Feiden, followed by Rebecca Cross.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Kayla. Thank you. Kayla, try unmuting yourself again. There we go.
Sorry, I've got a baby in my lap and he reached around and grabbed it. Okay. Thank you for allowing me to make a comment today. My name is Kayla Feiden. I am an ESA mom and founder of the community nonprofit Empowered Arizona Families, which is a stakeholder in the current rules making process and of the program generally. I'm very pleased with the new vision statement that the Department of Education has that was introduced by Superintendent Kathy Hoffman today. Equity for all students to achieve their full potential. Being the mother of 3 children on ESA, 2 with special education needs and 1 with special medical needs, this is very important to me. My youngest ESA student was placed on the Class Wallet system for Q1 of this year, while older 2 remain on the Bank of America debit cards until July next year. While I'm grateful for the extension of the use of this payment mode, I am personally affected by the limitations of the current platform from Class Wallet that it presents to more complicated students' situations without the use of a card. I want to make it clear that before this extension expires next July, we must find a solution together that meets the needs of all ESA families. Class Wallet does have several options for a debit card to use through their platform, along with the necessary ways to monitor, audit, control spending so that we can continue the successful, fraud-free operation of the ESA program. While we may have entered into this contract with Class Wallet, having about 2/3 of ESA families using it to pay private school tuition, the pandemic has skewed that percentage towards families using their scholarships in much more individualized ways. While having a marketplace platform available is very useful, there will always be families that require a card in order to meet their children's unique educational needs, and allowing families that express that need access to a sufficient card option through Class Wallet falls beautifully in line with the department's new vision statement to ensure equity for all students. My organization has been in contact with the Treasurer's Office and Class Wallet, and we've done much of our own work in delineating the features and benefits necessary and available in a card option. We would very much like to meet with the department and you as well, Superintendent, to discuss families' needs and how they can be effectively, efficiently, and expediently met. I look forward to our ongoing communication, and I trust you will be willing to grant us an audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla. Next up, we have Rebecca Cross, followed by Coco Lovejoy.
This is Rebecca Cross. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Rebecca. Please proceed.
Thank you. Allison Wilkes thought she was registered today, but was not. So I will be reading her statement on her behalf today. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I appreciate everyone's time and attention. My family has utilized the ESA program for several years, and without it, my child would be left behind. It truly has empowered us to take education into our own hands and ensure our child is now truly getting a free and appropriate education in Arizona. I would like to speak today regarding a point found on the agenda item 5C, notes under the title, the most significant areas left to address and staff's current understanding on what to propose. Specifically, I'm referring to the second bullet point under that section that states, establish a process within ADE to review expenses or address disagreements before an appeal. The process will have a panel of both internal ADE staff and external individuals. ADE is crafting a proposal for inclusion in this role. It appears that this part of the rules making process is talking about making rules for the ADE to follow before ESA parents have to take things to the SBE with a formal appeal. Letting ADE write the proposed rules for reviewing expenses and addressing disagreements before the appeal is not acceptable, and ESA parents would like external individuals clearly defined, as is unacceptable to continue to allow special interest groups against this program a seat at the table. Who are the external individuals, and more importantly, how are they selected? ESA parents were assured that we were going to be part of the entire rulemaking process. It appears in this case, SBE's let an ADE write part of the rules with no mention of letting ESA parents review or give feedback on that part of the rule before it may be ratified. I oppose this as it makes no sense for the department to write rules for themselves or not allow ESA parents review and feedback. SBE needs to recognize that parents want the opportunity to provide feedback on that part as well before the rules are adopted next month. Again, thank you for giving me your time and attention to provide feedback today. I look forward to receiving more clarification on this matter. And again, this is on behalf of Allison Wilkes.
Thank you, Rebecca. Next up, we have Coco Lovejoy, followed by Kelly Piccittino.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, Ms. Lovejoy, go ahead. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I wanted to speak about the need for a debit card for many ESA families. I don't know numbers, but the transition from Bank of America to Class Wallet was done in phases, with phase 4 being the last one, based on historic data on how these accounts use their educational funds. The phase 4 accounts are accounts referred to as complex accounts, meaning accounts of students that are not having expenses that are predictable. The only predictable element of these accounts is that they're all over the place when it comes to how the funds are used. I want to remind everyone how ESA started. It started as an educational magical opportunity to learn for special needs students that didn't have their educational needs met in the public school system. I'm sorry. In 2014, Tim Keller, Executive Director of the Institute for Justice Arizona chapter and the Institute's lead attorney defending the program in court, said, I quote, Arizona's ESA, could you please pause for 1 second? I'm sorry, give me just a second. Thank you. I'm going again. What I'm trying to say here is that Arizona, Tim Keller said, Arizona's ESA program is changing lives and improving educational outcomes for more than 700 special needs students currently participating in the program. I unquote. Then he added, the Arizona Supreme Court's decision is a huge victory for the families participating in the ESA program, end quote. Now in 2020, and 9,000 kids later, our program's financial management was granted to a company that is great, but great at managing vouchers. Our needs are not met. To ADE, my kids are 3 numbers in phase 4, 3 complex children without a face, just 3 names followed by one or several eligibility labels. To me, there are 3 very different boys that cannot be taught without their parents having access to a debit card. There are thousands of companies, potential tutors, therapists, instructors, and paraprofessionals that are never going to be on Class Wallet. Without this debit card, my kids are crippled, literally disabled twice. Due to their disabilities, they have to work 10 times harder than typical peers. The burden is on me, their mom, spending hours a day trying to find creative ways to harass providers to sign up, only to meet a hard no, and humiliate my very own kids by disclosing the particularities of their disabilities and how they get funds that they can't really use anyway. Having to apologize and humiliate myself as to why I can't pay with card when card or cash is all the thousands of providers around at stake. It's heartbreaking. The good part is a lot of the families are happy on Class Wallet. My solution is to give a debit card to anyone who requests it. We love you, we love ESA. Remember, we're doing it for our kids and we want to see you keeping them in mind as well. Serve all the kids is doable. Thank you very much for everything you do for us and thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lovejoy. Next up, we have Kelly Piccittino, followed by Tamara Comfort-Miller.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Kelly. Thank you.
Can you see me? That's the other question. Is my camera working?
Yes, ma'am, it is. Go.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Kelly. I am a parent for the ESA, involved in the ESA program, sorry. Before I begin, I do want to say thank you all very much for showing up and listening to all of us today and listening to public comment. also providing a way for my child and others' children to continue providing education and therapy to our children. In 2017, I sat at an IEP meeting, and the therapist looked over at the table and told me that my son was just a number on a piece of paper. And I was very blown back and was very offended, and I still am, as you can tell. And I'd like that, I guess if it's a stigma, to be removed from from the educators and therapists. My son is not just a number on a piece of paper. He is to many people, but he's not to me. And he's worth putting in countless hours of teaching and advocating for. So also, yesterday I got to submit my expense report, and I love doing those because I feel so empowered when I do them. I love accounting myself, keeping myself accountable for the items that I purchase for his education and the therapies that get to be provided for that. A couple things to get to the good stuff. On our rules, I would like to talk about the supplemental materials and read what I suggest should be rewritten. And I believe it should be supplemental materials should be defined as items that are relevant directly to the course of study or subject and not limited, and includes therapy materials and items, meaning to enhance language and speech skills, occupational skills, and physical abilities that can enhance and enrich our children's lives and education. Under the goods, services, or goods portion, I think that does need to be looked at and defined a lot more. The goods services should be just any item, educational therapy item that is there to support and expand the service or that topic or instruction. Lots of times, therapy materials that you might see in a clinical setting can be used in the educational setting, and when you home educate, you can apply those throughout all subjects. And then I'm actually going to go over, so I'm going to end it right there. And if anyone has any other time, then I'd like to be donated that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly. Next up is Tamara Kumpfmiller, followed by Mark Jornstead.
Hi, this is Tamara Kumpfmiller. Can you hear me?
We can, Tamara, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. It's my first time speaking, so I just wanted to be sure I had it right.
Okay.
Hi, I am an ESA parent to 2 children currently on the program and a toddler. And I wanted to begin by saying how grateful I am for the life-changing empowerment scholarship account that my children, my 2, have received. I researched the ESA for 3 years before applying and felt like I had a pretty decent handle on the workings of the program. However, after practically memorizing the handbook, we received notice that my children, being new to the program this year, would be among the first homeschoolers to be placed directly into ClassWallet, with practically no training or information available to us. Thanks to a number of veteran ESA parents, I was able to scrounge up a lot of information and joined in the effort to get vendors and tutors to register with ClassWallet. Sadly, most of the vendors we needed are refusing to be affiliated with ClassWallet. Noting this lack of resources, I did have to readjust my children's educations for this year. We chose to eliminate dance class, martial arts, music lessons, swim team, art lessons, equine therapy, and even our major language arts program, Barton Reading and Tutoring, from our education plan because our family simply cannot afford to wait weeks at a time to be reimbursed such substantial funds or to risk rejection of the reimbursement request. Living in a more rural part of Arizona, our options are extremely limited, so we have proceeded to purchase our curriculum from the few vendors in ClassWallet Marketplace or curriculum vendors that have signed up with ClassWallet. But that has not been without its own issues. We don't receive communication from these companies, shipping or otherwise. Some companies have very specific ordering information or instructions that is not widely known. And I personally waited an entire month for a refund due to one of these situations. Delays in order approvals cause things to go out of stock and require reordering. The help desk takes nearly a week to reply to even the slightest of requests. And if your request is more complicated, you can plan on a month before you'll hear anything back, which I personally have experienced twice. Again, however, my children are extremely blessed to be a part of this program. But there has to be a better way, more education, more training for staff and families, more understanding. I am not someone trying to fill my house with the latest technology, although my dyslexic child would greatly benefit from assistive technology. I'm a mother who wants to provide a decent education for my children who cannot receive that education in the local or virtual schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. Next up, we have Mark Jordanstad, followed by Catherine Bolts.
President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Mark. Go ahead.
I'm Dr. Mark Jornstead, Executive Director of the Arizona School Administrators. Let's proceed to item 5E1, submission of self-reported data in the accountability system. The CCRI is a critical component of the 9 through 12 accountability system. We appreciate the reopening of the opportunity for districts and charters to submit the self-reported data. Our specific request is for a long deadline. Right now, many schools and districts are in the midst of reopening for in-person learning. A 2 or 3 week deadline will have a minimal effect on increasing submissions. Consider looking to the end of the calendar year. Now, item 5E3, accountability component analysis review. I want to quote from the data quality evaluation report that's attached. However, most of the components have data quality concerns. Generally, components that collect data from a single year perform better than components from multiple years. Additionally, components that were collected on students that require extra services, special education and English learners, have the strongest data quality concerns. So consider that many districts have 12 to 17% of students in special education. Others have English language student percentages varying from 5 to over 50%. Consider that multiple year components are critical in longitudinal analysis of growth measures. So without quality data, these components will not yield accurate school and district grades. ASA supports annual assessments. We want to know how our students are performing. However, when outside factors potentially compromise the data, the use of assessment to label schools inaccurately is of deep concern. Educators are making heroic sacrifices to teach our students. Don't mislabel their efforts with inaccurate accountability. Assessment, yes. Accountability, yes. The use of inaccurate, poor quality data, no.
Thank you, Mark. Next up, we have Catherine Bolts, followed by R.C. Christner. Catherine?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Catherine. Go ahead.
Great. My name is Dr. Catherine Bolts. I am an ESA mom, and I am also a board member for the Empowered Arizona Families organization that has been created and led by Kayla Feiden. My expertise is in biochemistry. I have a doctorate in that area, but I have also been working hard to educate my son, who is a special education student with very complex needs. In fact, at this moment, he has just left his occupational therapist appointment and he is sitting outside waiting. In my view, the primary purpose of the ESA program is to empower education. And that is what all its efforts should be directed toward. The ESA program needs to offer a debit card for all who want it. This is particularly important for children like mine who have complex educational needs. And more parents during this pandemic are finding that they need complex spending to meet their children's needs. There is a lack of options on ClassWallet. Vendors refuse ClassWallet. I know our occupational therapist has many ESA students. She is the therapist that is recommended by others for children who really struggle. She is the one who does a fantastic job, and I value her and her efforts as a vendor. She told me she felt coerced to join ClassWallet. She knew that her low-income families could not afford to float payments to her, and so she wanted to be there to serve them, but she was not happy with what ClassWallet offered her. I have heard similar concerning stories from other individual vendors that we work for. Currently, the ClassWallet system is not set up to serve these individual vendors, but a debit card would serve them and would serve ESA parents better. I have spent hours doing research on what an ideal debit card might feature. I would like to request once again a meeting with Superintendent Hoffman. My repeated emails have gone unanswered. We would also like to meet with the treasurer and with Class Wallet all at the same time to get everyone in the room. We have already met with the treasurer. Tomorrow we're meeting with Class Wallet. We still await a response from Superintendent Hoffman.
Thank you, Catherine. Next up, we have R.C. Christner, followed by Catherine Visser.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I'm also a parent of 2 ESA children. One is complex, one is much more simpler in an aspect. However, I would also like to speak to the aspect of needing a debit card because like my eldest child is attempting to use community college classes, as well as other parents I know that utilize the community college, as well as other university online programs that we're unable to do with Class Wallet. We cannot use the concierge service because we have to register the student for the college. It is not something Class Wallet can do to be able to pay for the invoices. The other options we have, I'm not finding that there's a second mailing address. And for those that are unfamiliar, there is an Arizona Secretary of State address confidentiality program that uses a mail forwarding process to securely allow participants to receive their mail. This protects their actual home address from being used. However, the ACP program cannot accept packages and recommend using either another family member's address or services such as UPS store or PO box. Because the ACP address is our legal home of record address for any state agencies, including the Department of Education, it is what is on file with ESA and any school records. We need a secondary mailing address option for packages to be sent outside the ACP address on file. The other problem that we find is that there are options with some of the universities having third-party payee, but these were not set up. And so at this point, my son was not able to participate in education for the semester other than what I already had for him. So we're looking for options that we can utilize a debit card to be able to continue his education to the best of our ability for what he needs with schooling. Thank you.
Thank you, RC. Next up, we have Catherine Visser, followed by Vanessa DiCarlo. Catherine? Catherine Visser.
Yeah, I am
There?
here. You hear me now?
Yes, we
Okay,
can.
great. The screen shifted just as you called my name the first time. I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to listen to us and include us in this process. We really appreciate it as parents. I'm an ESA parent. I guess I should introduce myself that way. I have 2 children in the program, and I've been in the program for the last 10 years. And I'll tell you, we really appreciate the process to be able to have a voice here. And also, like last week, when the decision was made to at least keep our debit cards going until we have a more workable relationship going on Class Wallet. We really appreciate the efforts there as well. I think the process with Class Wallet has also gotten caught up in a continuing problem with consistency on approvals that parents are experiencing from the Department of Education. And I know it's difficult when I get new staff in there to get everybody on the same page. And some of them, when we're asking for approvals, it's always on things that are not clear. Or because if we could read the handbook and make a decision, we wouldn't be asking for clarification. So I believe in SB 1224, we were supposed to be provided with a previously approved list. And a parent just in the last few weeks was told that, again, we won't have that list because they don't want to make the Department of Education doesn't want to make it look like they are recommending these curriculums. If that's a problem, we just need a disclaimer on that list to say this is not a recommendation. This is just things that have been approved in the past, and it's not limiting, you're not limited to this list. I also would suggest meeting with parents to develop the resource so it works for both the parents and the staff. Because I can see how having a pre-approved list might make it easier for especially newer staff to come in and be able to read through that list instead of denying stuff that in several cases it's been for the same parent. It's been approved, pre-approved to be purchased with the debit card, and then when they have a child on the debit card and in Class Wallet, when they upload the stuff into Class Wallet, then it's been denied as an unapproved expenditure, even though they had an approval to purchase it for another child. And then see, the Class Wallet has a potential to be, it really has a lot of potential if they're going to put it in to develop. And I realize that our ESA program, we do a lot of different things than what they've serviced before. So I really hope they're going to listen to what we need in functionality, both on the parents and the vendor side. Parents are making lists of what we need, including what Kathy Bolts talked about in developing our idea of what the perfect platform would be as far as having a debit card and the other avenues within Class Wallet. When we originally,
Ms. Visser?
Yes.
Visser, you're out of time. Could you wrap up in like 10 seconds? Thank you.
Okay. I think I've said what I can say, but we really appreciate all of this and the responsiveness this last week from ADE and all the efforts that go behind the scenes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Next up, we have Vanessa DiCarlo, followed by Robert DiCarlo. Vanessa?
Hi, my name is Vanessa DiCarlo. I have three children on ESA. 2 are now in Class Wallet, and 1 is still on Bank of America. I want to thank you for having the option to have an ESA program. It's benefited our children greatly. I also appreciate the new equity initiatives that ADE has put forth. I'd like to address the ways that Class Wallet actually doesn't really align with those equity initiatives and the inaccessible ways that Class Wallet has created barriers for our family in getting services. So number one, one of the ways that it's created inaccessibility is through a lack of options, such as being able to sign up through classes without school, as well as providers not willing to be signed up with Class Wallet. My one child that is being served in Class Wallet will be substantially harmed by this, as she won't be able to be served by her speech language pathologist that she currently receives 2 sessions a week. So that's been very difficult, as well as the ability to have the actual purpose of the program being that we this is school choice, and the choices and the options that we can choose are very limited by the barriers of providers and products not being in Class Wallet. So as well as the inaccessible structure of Class Wallet, when we look at the web content and accessibility guidelines under the WCAG. So as a person with a disability, this very much affects us. The harms that this has created in our family, not being able to have providers has put an undue stress on us as a family, because now I am becoming the provider, thus not being able to work because my energy is now the one-on-one provider for my children, instead of having providers. So the remedy I'd really like to seek is a debit card option for all, as well as meeting with empowered Arizona families, as they have been a voice for many of us ESA providers. Specifically, if Superintendent Hoffman could reach out, because we have collaborated and really brought our concerns forth, and I feel that they would be a great representation for the ESA families. Thank you so much for listening, for having this option. We are so appreciative of as families.
Thank you, Vanessa. Next up, we have Robert DiCarlo, followed by Isabel Montenegro.
He's my husband, and he can't. He's not able to. He had an emergency. So if you can move on, thank you.
Thank you for that, Vanessa. Next up, we have Esli Montenegro, and then we'll go into agenda item 2, the former call to the public, and we'll have William Damian followed by Colin Elazier Poole. So Esli Montenegro.
Hi, yes. Can you hear me and see me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. My name is Esli Montenegro, and I represent American Federation for Children and advocate for school choice and ESA families. So thank you thank you to the president, board members, and superintendent. I appreciate all the hard work that you're putting into the improvement of the ESA program. And of course, I appreciate the new vision statement that does include equity, and that's helping families reach their full potential. As we know, the ESA students have the most disadvantages, right? And although many efforts are being made and dedicated to the improvement of ESAs, several critical concerns have been rising. And I've been dealing with these families, helping families very recently. ESA's families have actually identified all these concerns. They've drawn them out, they've laid them out before us, and they've even created a flow chart. And so 3 of these main points that I want to wrap up that you've been hearing over and over from families, and I do hope that we have your attention. The first issue is the debit card. We are hearing families say that not only has it been a missing factor, it's being taken away. So the request is simple, is bringing back the debit card with the option, right? If the family needs it, let them have it. The second issue that is a big rising concern is a FERPA violation and privacy concerns. When families have to recruit a vendor to please be on ClassWallet, they have to identify their personal information and possibly even give away their children's disability to explain to ClassWallet, to explain the process of what ClassWallet is to this new vendor. And the third issue is there's ADE rights violation concerns. In other words, not all families who are part of ADA have the accessibility to ClassWallet. So these are the 3 main issues that we're hearing over and over again. And of course, these 3 main issues, what they're doing is they're breaking out and creating thousands of more issues. So the biggest request, and I sincerely appreciate all the arduous work that goes around unnoticed. I know that so much goes unnoticed, but the urgent resolution at this moment is an in-person or web meeting immediately with the ESA family representatives, with ClassWallet, with the state board, with superintendent, and with the treasurer's office. So thank you again so much for your time, for listening to the list of families whose children depend on the efficiency and success of the ESA program. I appreciate you all and what you do.
Thank you. Next up, we have William Damian, followed by Colin Elazier Poole.
So Bill might, so I'm Colin Elazier Poole. We're both from the same organization. I think we can make this relatively quick for everyone. Thank you guys for having me on. So I'm a volunteer with ASHRAE. ASHRAE is the American Society of Heating and Refrigeration Engineers. I'm in the Phoenix chapter here. Bill Damon is down in the Tucson chapter. And we're just doing some outreach. We have some technical guidelines on reopening for schools. It's a 1-page document on filtration and other methods meant to mitigate viruses. We just want to make that available to everyone and make us available as a nonprofit technical resource for everybody. I know we might be late to the party, so I didn't know if this was appropriate or not, but anyway, that's all we had to say. My email and contact information is available for you guys, and if you need to reach out to me, please do.
Thank you, Colin. President Arducci, that concludes item number 4, call to the public.
Thank you very much, and thanks for everybody who commented and for being mindful of the time and for the topics that were covered. And we let you know that we listened to them and very appreciative and understand the concerns. We'll move on to item 5A. Before we do that, we have some time constraints with some board members. And so I'm thinking that we'll continue until the first board member needs to leave, and then we'll take a break at the time that first board member needs to leave. Is that okay, Alicia? We'll just try to proceed that route.
Yes, President Arducci, that sounds great.
Thank you. Then we'll move on to item 5A.
President Narducci, item 5A is a presentation, discussion, and possible action on assessment considerations for spring of 2021. This item will just be verbally presented to the board by Audra from the department. Audra?
Hi, this is Audra. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Audra.
Hi. So as we've been working through assessment considerations for spring 2021, we are coming to you today with some information and a request for a recommendation. We've been working with national experts and our own Arizona Advisory Technical Committee, our TAC, on getting, together considerations. So in short, our consideration is that for grades 3 through 8, we use the same exact test form that we administered in 2019. It would be the exact same questions. Again, under normal circumstances, we refresh them every year, but this would allow us to have the opportunity to do some exact comparisons from 2019, which was the last time that we administered AZM2. And then also we are recommending or asking for your approval to remove all embedded field test items from the test. Again, under normal circumstances, before a test item can be added to an operational assessment, we field test them with all of our students. And this would allow us to shorten our tests by just a few questions, but we think it's really important during this time that we go in and we assess the students on the questions that we absolutely need information on, so that we can use those results. So at this time, we are again just recommending that we be allowed to use the test forms from 2019 for grades 3 through 8 for both ELA and mathematics, and remove the embedded field test items for all grades.
Thank you, Audra. Appreciate the presentation. Board members, do we have any questions or discussion for Audra or amongst ourselves? Hearing none, do I have a motion to use the 2019 AZM2 test forms in the spring of 2021 for grades 3 through 8 and remove AZM2 embedded field test items for all grades?
So moved.
So moved.
I have a motion by Cal. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second. Who was the second?
Member Mack.
Thank you, Member Mack. Can everybody please unmute? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 5B. Director Williams.
President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. Item 5E is a presentation, discussion, and possible action to open rulemaking procedures on R7-2-61501 special education endorsements. Deputy Director Feiden has been working on this with the Certification Advisory Committee. Ketcher, would you like to input additional information?
Sure, President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, and members, very briefly, earlier this year, the board had adopted a certification endorsement to more seamlessly allow a transition for general education teachers to transition into special education classrooms. Those were for specific special education classrooms. Around that same time, there were discussions with folks at the Arizona Schools for the Deaf and Blind and within ADE to maybe take that same path for the visually impaired certificate and the hearing impaired certificate. So the proposal in front of you today is modeled after that certification endorsement adopted by the board earlier this year, but applying to visually impaired and hearing impaired students and those certificates attached with being able to educate those students. As Alicia mentioned, went through the Certification Advisory Committee. It was recommended by them unanimously to move that forward and worked with ASDB and ADE in a very collaborative effort to put it in front of you today to start that rulemaking process.
Thank you, Catcher. Appreciate that. Appreciate all the work done on this. Board members, questions for Catcher or discussion amongst ourselves?
President Narducci, can I make a comment?
Yes, please, Superintendent Hoffman.
Thank you, and so board members and thank you, Catcher, for working on this. I also want to say thank you to my team for working on this, and just to throw a lot of support behind this. I'm really excited about this endorsement for having teachers specifically and having the certification needed to serve students who are either visually impaired and or hearing impaired is a very high need for our state. And this is a solution that was found by all of the stakeholders who have been working on this along with our certification team. And so I'm really excited about this as a great solution to move us forward, hopefully to help with the recruitment of teachers in this special education area. And I hope that our teachers out there will be interested in it. So this is the first step, is getting this established. And then I hope we can help promote it as a way for teachers out there who are interested in becoming more specialized to make sure that they can have the training needed to serve these populations of students.
Thank you, Superintendent Hoffman. Any other comments or questions or discussion? Thank you. Do I have a motion to open rulemaking procedures on R7-2?
So moved.
Oh, let me just finish that. I hesitated because I couldn't read the number. 615.01 special education endorsement. Member Welborn.
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Who was the second?
Christine Burton.
Thank you, Member Burton. Please unmute. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you so much. We'll move on to item number 5C. And this item is for information only, and staff will be updating the board on the work that has been occurring with the ESA rules. Deputy Baden.
President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, and members, we don't have a PowerPoint or a big presentation for you today. Unlike the last time the board saw an update, a little more brief. You can see in the executive summary a brief recap of what we have done in the last couple of months. A couple bullet points on the changes that are in this rule. As you can see, the changes that are being presented to the board in this rule are relatively minor. I don't want to minimize any of the changes in there, but they are relatively minor when compared to some of the other changes that we'll be presenting to the board at the October board meeting, which again, the deadline for adopting these rules by the statute is November 1st. So a couple things that I just kind of want to highlight for the board is things that still need to be worked on and potentially things that we need to revisit based on some public comments we heard and also received. And I should make mention of that too. There are public comments that were received and submitted as part of this item and provided to the board. And so at the bottom, those last 4 bullet points are the things that are still needing to be worked on. The definition of associated goods that was added as part of Senate Bill 1224. To be quite frank, associated goods is a pretty vague term. And so the board probably needs to help fill in some blanks on what that means and how it complies both with the statute and also the best interests of the program. That process, which is the second bullet point, and this was referenced in the public comments, and I do just want to make a mention, and I think we're all aware of it. It is part of a process. Sometimes we do ask the department to draft some items, specifically on items that they work on intimately that we just don't have the same level of knowledge. Anything that they draft, we always take back to a larger group and put in front of this board for discussion. In addition to vetting ourselves, parents will always have an opportunity to view those items and provide comment before the board ever adopts them. And then the effective dates, trying to establish effective dates for when these items will be implemented. We do have some flexibility on when we can implement some of these items, but also want to take into account that some of these items, based on the statute, probably need to be implemented sooner rather than later, but there are somewhat significant processes that are in the draft rules right now that will take time to implement, both administratively and otherwise. And then finally, the appeals process. The board was not exempted from Office of Administrative Hearings processes. And so we are required to send the appeals through that office before the board can weigh in on them. And so the rules don't reflect that process. We were kind of hoping that the legislature would come back and provide that exemption. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. And so those rules need to be revised. You see there's a note there. Those are largely completed, those revisions. We just needed to take some time to actually physically draft them and put them in there. So those are the items we'll be working on in the intervening weeks before the October board meeting to provide you with what we hope is a final product. And I think I had mentioned this last time that we're going to get as close as we can to a final product without having to revisit the rules every couple months or too frequently. But I think it's realistic to expect that not everything's going to be resolved in this first round of rulemaking. We have a deadline we have to stick to. And some of these issues are just really sticky and things that have been challenging with the program since it was started 9 years ago. And so I think the board should commit to trying to work through those issues, but may not be able to solve them by the October board meeting, but we'll do what we can on staff, certainly, to get us as close as we can. So that really constitutes the update. I'm happy to answer any questions or take any comments, of course, from members, but no action required here today.
Catcher, thank you. Your comments are well taken. Your work, the entire board working with ADE is complimented on this undertaking. It's a difficult undertaking, and we heard a lot of comments today, and we've seen it over the last year or so that we all agree that each of our children, even without special needs, are unique. And then when we go into our special needs children, there's even more uniqueness that needs to be considered and further assessed, and how these things can work into bettering the ESA plan as well as the entire education system is crucial. So, I understand taking our time, the consideration that we need by taking in all the factors that need to go into this. Definitions are tough. Being in the legal profession for as long as I have, regardless of how long people look at words, it is still difficult to come up with a definition that everybody thinks fits these words. But I think our goal is to make sure that the definitions that do go into this rule actually take into consideration as much as possible the uniqueness of the children's and the children in the program and the program that needs to be continuing for these special needs children. With that, any discussion, questions, or Member Burton, please proceed.
So I want to thank Catcher for actually all the work you've done on this, but particularly today for clarifying the process of reviewing the draft rules. And that's, the ADE may provide a draft, but there is a process for stakeholders to, provide input and comments on our rules. So I just want to thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you, Member Burton. Cal.
President Narducci, members of the board, I also want to just publicly thank Catcher and the rest of the staff, along with ADE and the ESA parents, for looking for a solution. After several decades of being responsible for spending taxpayer dollars for students, I can speak with authority that there's always a tension between trying to get it the most efficient and the most flexible way of spending money, while at the same time respecting the almost sacred trust of spending taxpayer dollars. And there is no perfect solution. There's always that tension, because we want to do things quickly and efficiently and most responsively to students, but we know from experience, if we simply hand out debit cards, unfortunately, bad things happen. And there has to be processes and there has to be accountabilities in order to protect taxpayer dollars. So I just want to speak to recognize the difficulty of the problem and the reality that there's never going to be a perfect solution, that these kind of issues are issues that require constant tweaking, constant attention, and constant understanding amongst all parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Cal. Anybody else?
President Narducci.
Yes. Is this member Kay?
Oh, were you going to call on me or?
Oh, no. Who's speaking? I'm sorry.
It's member Broussard.
Oh, sorry. I just confused your voice. I can't see you. So go ahead. Sorry.
You know, with the risk of sounding redundant, I also want to thank Catcher and Alicia and the rest of the staff with working with the parents on this. And, you know, just reading through comments and listening to comments, you can sense some frustration, but you can also sense the gratitude in being heard. And I have full faith in the state board staff and ADE to come to, you know, some really great changes, procedures, and definitions regarding this. And there were a couple of comments that I read through that I was just kind of discouraged when clearly academic and educationally, or well, supplemental materials, I suppose, were denied. And I just hope that we can develop a way to train and support the staff at ADE when it comes to approving things for the students, flashcards, you know, keyboards that help, headphones that help, microscopes that help with our students' education. So I just, those were concerning, but I know that they're being addressed and that they're being considered. And we want to make sure that even if our students are not in our public school system, that we are still providing a rich environment for them to learn. So thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Appreciate it. I did expand my screen, so now I have more of a gallery, but not a complete gallery. So any other comments? Thank you. I think that completes item 5C. And again, just appreciate all the work and diligence in this. Move on to item 5D. And on 5D, it's an update on rulemaking. And this item is for information only. As board staff is providing an update to the board, we will look to close this rule at the October meeting. However, for this agenda item, I'd like to recognize that Yom Kippur started last night and ends this evening. And it is, I believe, the highest holy day. And so we recognize that today. Additionally, I would like to recognize the Holocaust survivor, Oscar Knobloch. Mr. Knobloch has been recognized by the Jewish Historical Society and has received their Heritage Award for his work in educating thousands of students and adults for the past 20 years about his Holocaust experience. I'm sorry, I just read that and got emotional, so I apologize. I look forward to hearing his story and others at our October State Board meeting. Alicia, is there anything else on that item?
Unless board members have any questions, there is no other information to provide.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to presentation, discussion, and possible action on the 2021 statewide accountability system for elementary and high school schools. Item 5E1, Director Williams.
Thank you, President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. Item 5E1 is a presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding the state accountability state self-reported component analysis for 2019-2020 school year. Wendy Davey from the department will be providing a brief overview of this agenda item. The board is being asked to direct the field to submit their data and direct ADE to determine the deadline for submission of self-reported components for both 912 traditional and the 912 alternative models. As Mark Jornstad stated in his comment to the board, it would be beneficial for schools through the administration of the department to have that deadline be extended towards the end of this calendar year so that schools have enough time to input that data. Wendy, are you available to present?
I am, Alicia. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. And Jessica will pull up the PowerPoint. You can just tell her when to advance the slide.
Okay, I'm ready when you guys are. Thank you, President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, and board members. Our first item today is we're going to talk about the self-report data from last year, fiscal year 20. Just to sort of give a real quick synopsis and recap, the self-report components, there's 4 of them. There are the 2 CCRI, 1 for traditional schools and 1 for alternative schools. Then we also have the alternative credit earned and also the alternative on track to graduate. So as you know, on March 31st, we did not eliminate, but we said that the letter grade from the previous year would be brought over. A specific determination on what to do with the self-report wasn't made at that time, so we moved forward collecting that data. One of the first things that we did is we took the deadline of July 1st off the table. We knew that the schools were going through a lot of challenges, so we also wanted to know what were going to be those challenges or what were the challenges they had. So our IT department allowed for a narrative to be added. So this was also the first time that all components would be collected through ADE Connect. So we were able to put in a narrative section that would allow the schools to tell us what challenges, what concerns, the things that were going on with them in doing and collecting this data. So then we extended the date from July 15th to August 28th. Next slide, please. So as you can see here, this is just an overall comparison from fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 20. And you can see the blue is the 2019 and the orange is the 2020. And as we expected, we did see a decline in the self-report. I'm going to go ahead and give you a little bit more on the numbers and not just the percentages. So if you could go to the next slide. So as you can see here, 2019 and 2020, 2019 is on the top as far as how many submitted and how many were in the database. And then also the same thing for 2020. We did see about a 42% drop in reporting for our traditional CCRI, and then a 34% drop in our alternative CCRI. And then on track and credit earns, which are on the alternative model, also dropped about 27%. Next slide, please. Thank you. One of the most enlightening and information that we got was what was coming in on the narratives. So in the general narratives, we got information like there was concerns about no FAFSA. There was concerns about, excuse me, no AP testing. There was also concerns about AZ merit not being tested, but just a reminder, it would have only been the 10th grade test. So that wouldn't apply here, but there was also those concerns. So in addition to the PowerPoint, we also included a write-up of the narratives that we put in as far as supplemental documentation as well. More interesting and, not more interesting, but more impactful was some of the information we got from the alternative schools. So if you go to the next slide. And a lot of our alternative schools started talking to us about how they were having trouble getting a hold of their students. For many of their alternative students had to go take a job as parents were being laid off. They were having to help to support. There was also a lot of talk about them having to help younger kids that were still in school and trying to navigate the online. So these are some of the narratives that we got and information that we were receiving through the reporting of the schools that did get a chance to report. So if we look at the next slide, and excuse me, you also have another secondary document that goes into much more detail on the changes of the points. Now, I would want to specify, keep in mind that we're looking at about a 40 to 30 to 40% drop in reporting. So these numbers I would consider preliminary or just that small set of comparison, because if we do reopen and we gather more data, these numbers could change. But overall, we did not see a significant drop from fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 20. And you can see some of those numbers there for the traditional, only went down about 0.6. And then without the bonus points, we have some comparison there. And like I said, in the support document too, we go into a lot of detail. And then on the next slide, and that's just a little bit more detail on the self-report. So we couldn't go into detail on that one as much because last year we did not collect that data in AD Connect. So we've had CCRI in there for 2 years, and this will be our first year for credits earned and on track. Okay, next slide. So basically that brings you up to date on where we stand on the collection of that document, what we're currently seeing, what the narratives brought to the table. And at this point, we stand for any questions or any next steps that you would like us to follow up on.
Thank you, Wendy. Appreciate it.
President Narducci, this is Alicia. I do want to just note for the board members' knowledge that there will be accountability appeals in the in the fall of 2021. So if we have accountability appeals and those that utilize self-reported data for their accountability system will need self-reported data from the 1920 school year to potentially appeal. So that's just another reason why right now we are bringing this forth to the board to direct the field to report their self-reported data.
Thank you, Alicia. Any other questions for Wendy? Not other questions since we haven't had any yet. Any discussion amongst the board?
President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, and members of the board, there's no question this is an ugly year for self-reporting data just because things were so out of kilter last spring. But I simply want to restate that this is really valuable information and it's a valuable part of the accountability system. And so I just hope that the fact that it was ugly this spring won't detract from that and won't keep us from maintaining the vision that we have to make this a significant part of holding schools accountable and incentivizing schools to do the right things. Good information. I appreciate it. I hope we stay firm on this component.
Thank you, Kath. Appreciate that comment and agree with it. Any others?
I would like to make a comment. This is Member Wellborn. President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, and members of the board. This is the first item on our agenda among a couple more that are coming up that are talking about data collection and accountability. And I would just like to have us be very mindful of what we're, how we're using the data and how we're going to move forward given the challenges that all the schools are facing right now. So at some point during this agenda item, I'd like to have some discussion about making sure that we are getting valid data in the whole. We have a lot of detail stuff coming in here, but I do have concerns about how valid the data is given the disruptions that we have been experiencing. For example, the one item that, we've lost a number of students in the alternative schools because they had to pay help with, bringing money into the household rather than their studies. So while I think we need to move forward carefully to continue the data collection, I think we need to also be in mind that we're going to learn a lot about what COVID has done to our educational process, and we're going to see the data, which is important for us to move forward. But it's nowhere near the same thing we had last year. It's a new world, it's a new going forward. So I want us to be thinking about that. And one other piece of it, there's clearly a difference between the data collection part of it and accountability. And we're starting to hear already, the issue of what's fair to do given this year. And so I'll just tee that up a little bit as we move forward in the agenda, because I think it's very worthwhile for us as a board to vocalize what is reasonable and fair and has a good integrity in terms of the accountability model, and how do we ensure that we maintain the integrity of accountability so that it serves its function to hold everyone accountable, the teachers, the schools, and report to parents and the government how valuable are the effectiveness of our education system, but to do it in a way that's reasonable given what schools and teachers and families have been experiencing this way. So thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Let's do this. Why don't we go through items, all of item 5, and then at the end of item 5, before we proceed into item 6, we can have a discussion in line with what Patricia just presented, see if we want to go any further, get some more discussion going by board members, and maybe have some ADE input with discussion back and forth with Wendy as well, so that we can see where we go from here with that discussion. Is that in line? Alicia, does that work?
President Arducci, I would highly recommend that we take 5E1 and 5E2 as 2 separate agenda items, and then we can have a broader discussion on the data at 5E3 as it's agendized on the agenda.
Works for me.
President, can I just add too that in 5E2 and 3, we are being asked to vote on things that impact the accountability system. So that's my concern, is that we'd actually get into being asked to vote on something at a very small detail level of the accountability system without having first had a discussion of the overall strategy going forward on accountability.
Thank you, President Arducci. Member Wellborn, to that point, as it stands right now, the Arizona accountability system is, the board does not have authority on whether or not to not have an A through F letter grade system for the 2021 school year. That falls within the state legislator's authority. So at this time, what board staff and department staff are trying to do with these agenda items is do as much work as possible now. And if the board wants to have a further discussion, whether it's a policy statement or a white paper or a research session on the accountability system to provide the board's statement on accountability to those government agencies in which oversee accountability, the board can do that. But what I don't want to happen is I don't want us, the board, to put the field in a position in which there are aspects of the accountability system that are not fixed or modified because of other actions that the board has already taken. For example, in 5E2, the board has already retired Ames Science, so we do have to figure out a bonus point option for the accountability system. I would not want the board to put the field in a position of deciding some of these agenda items in March or April or May of next year. If the state legislator comes back in January and decides that there would be another waiver for the accountability system for this school year, then the only thing that's happened is the board's put in the work now, and that's okay.
Thank you, Alicia. Is there any other discussion in this regard regarding item 5E1? Okay, then do I have a motion to direct the field to submit their self-reported data for 2019-2020 school year and direct ADE to determine the deadline for submission of self-reported components for both 9 through 12 traditional model and the 9 through 12 alternative model for the 2019-2020 school year.
So moved. This is Member Broussard.
I have a motion by Member Broussard. Do I have a second?
Second by Member Burton.
I have a second by Member Burton. Thank you. Please all unmute. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Armando has a nay. So we have one nay. The motion passes. Armando, do you want to explain your nay, or you just want to stay at a nay?
Yeah, I think I'd like to explain it. I think
Okay.
I know we're trying to fix it, but sometimes it's just better to have a whole comprehensive approach. I think after our last meeting, I think within 2 days of our last meeting, Secretary DeVos had announced that she would not provide any waivers for the statewide exams assessments next year. And we're in this season of, well, who's going to be deciding these things? And we're in the midst of an election. It'll have lots of impacts on policy, educational policies, and direction. My biggest concern is just the validity of the exams. It's just, what will it measure? I think the only thing that's going to measure are responses to the pandemic. It's not going to measure the quality of education. It's just going to measure how did each school respond with the resources that it did or didn't have. And they're just sometimes just to kind of be patient, try to be wise in these things. And by voting yes, then it's like saying, well, let's just keep moving ahead. Sometimes just let's fix it, but let's really commit at some point that we're going to look comprehensively. Maybe it's just a protest vote, to say, let's at some point give direction, give advice, direction to legislature, give advice to schools, maybe just recognition that is an imperfect system and we're not going to punish people because they've tried to respond to the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Armando. Appreciate your opinion. With that, we'll move on to item 5E2. Director Williams, regarding the science bonus points.
Thank you. President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. Item 5E2 is in regard to the science bonus points. If you recall, at the last board meeting in August, the board retired the Ames science assessment, which ultimately means that the board needs to change how bonus points are awarded within the accountability system. Because 95% tested is a federal mandate for the science assessment, board staff and department are recommending that the board change the bonus points to 95% tested in the field test of the AZ-SCI. As I explained to the board in August, the board recognizes that the bonus points are very crucial to schools within the accountability system, so it's important to keep bonus points for schools. Wendy, would you like to present additional information on this item?
I'm ready, Alicia. Thank you. President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, and members, I'm going to move now to our next thing on the item, which is that bonus point. So like Alicia said, a little bit of the background. As you know, the K-8 and the 9-12 traditional model both have bonus points, up to 3 points that you can earn based on the old system on proficiency on that science test. During the August board meeting, it was moved that the field test would be the only test given, which means that the Ames test and the science test would be taken off the table and only the field test given. We are proposing, or actually being proposed, that the board consider awarding the points based on that 95% tested. And like Alicia said, that is required in some of our federal reporting as well. And we want to encourage everybody to participate if the world isn't a good place, we're there, everybody should participate. We also know that it's not best practices to ever use proficiency from a field test in any type of accountability. So this is another reason we wanted to bring it forward and a chance to keep those points on the table. Just a little bit other note there that this test is going to be in 5, 8, and 11 and not in 4, 8, and 10. So next slide. So I have 2 slides here that are very high level slides. When looking at our K-8 schools, we have a really good test record. About 98% of the schools are meeting that 95% tested criteria. And like we always do, we try to bring you the charter versus the non-charter, the size of the school, and then their poverty index, that free and reduced numbers there. So you can see there that it looks really good for our elementary school. So I know you had a chance to review some of these, but I'm going to go ahead and move to the 9-12. We have a little bit more challenges in our 9-12. And as you can see here, we're looking about in our data that about 61% of the 9-12s are meeting that 95% criteria. So you actually will see a little bit more of the not tested showing up in the graphs below. So again, it sort of distributes charter, non-charter, and by the size of the school. And the next slide. So when we put this together, we were still running some analysis, and we wanted to know exactly what was going to happen. We knew that the majority of the elementary schools would receive the bonus points, but we wanted to know, would anybody not receive bonus points, and how many more would receive bonus points? And we asked that same question with the high school. So since the time we submitted that, I actually have some numbers that I'm going to read to you right now that weren't in your actual presentation material. Excuse me. So when we look at the elementary schools, we only have 0.85, less than 1% of the schools will lose a point, or they'll lose their bonus points. You will have approximately 50.46% that are going to stay the same. Their points are going to stay the same. And then you have about 48%, a little bit more than 48% that are going to gain points in elementary. And now I'm going to go over to the high school because that is a little different. We can tell that with the slides we already have. In high school, we will have approximately 15% of our high schools that will lose their bonus points as they did not test 95%. We will have about 55, 56% that will remain the same. And we will have about 29% more of the schools that will actually gain points if we move to a bonus point based on 95%. So those are the scores that we had that we didn't have for you originally. Next slide, please. So at this point, we brought forth what some of the numbers that we have for you to consider, and we stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Wendy. Appreciate it. Again, complex, and thank you for all the good work.
President Narducci, this is Alicia.
Yes.
President Narducci, members of the board, one thing that I do want the board members to think about and to know that Wendy and I are thinking about, as well as the ATAC and AATAC, is that we recognize that there may be issues with testing 95% of students in the spring. What we're trying to do again is we're trying to plan for multiple scenarios of what could occur in the spring of 21. As Member Ruiz has stated with the U.S. Department of Education and Secretary DeVos, the current secretary has said that they will not be waiving statewide assessments in the spring. So we are trying to allow for that 95% tested within our accountability system, but we also recognize that testing could look a lot different in the spring or may not happen at all. So we have multiple avenues that we're trying to learn how to drive the car down. And so this is just one thing, at least a starting block, and the board can always go back and address any changes and adjust as needed based upon circumstances that occur in the spring of 21. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Any questions from the board or discussion items amongst the board?
Just President Narducci, members of the board, just a real quick comment that part of what can be achieved this year is the establishment of baselines for future testing and future growth. And in order to have a legitimate baseline, it's imperative that we test as many kids as possible, as legitimately as possible. So I support this move.
Thank you, Cal. Any other
Member
questions? Or
Ducey?
yes, Member Welborn.
I'm sorry, did I interrupt somebody else?
I think Cal was finished. I think you're good.
Okay. Thank you. I concur with most of what my colleague, Member Baker said until he got to the end of it. I really do believe that we do need to move forward with testing this year so we can have some way of seeing where the students are so that in future years we have a baseline of information by which we can then reevaluate and compare it to the existing models that we use for assessing grades and points. And I want to also respond to what Executive Director Williams said about, the legislature wouldn't convene until January. And so we're sort of at a holding point or a loss, not knowing if the grading will be suspended. But I'm concerned that we have the cart before the horse here. We have a role as a board to ensure that the grading system, the accountability model, has integrity and credibility, and to be working on tweaks to the model at this time, to me, sends the wrong message to our schools. It sends a message that the model is going forward and the grading and accountability is going forward. And I don't know that we can rely on the credibility of the data or the processes by which we're going to use to gather the data. And I think that it's also entirely unfair to think about grading schools and using the model at this time, not only because the data is not going to be, I'm worried about the integrity of the data, but also, as Member Ruiz says, what are we measuring? Are we actually measuring learning, or are we measuring the schools struggling with trying to become experts in remote teaching and education in a very trying time? So for my part, in good faith, I cannot support any kind of change to the model at this level. I would much rather have some meaningful conversation of, if we had accountability model, if we, how do we, what is appropriate given the situation we're in, and take a stand to voice that opinion, rather than just wait to take orders from legislators until after the election. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. I appreciate those comments. Alicia, the proposal that we are voting on right now is to approve the use of the 95% tested threshold. And if I understand what the comments have been made, is that we're working within the law as we know it currently. We're working within the directives as we know it currently. Things may change in January. We don't know. Things may stay the same in January. We don't know. But the path, I liked your analogy with respect to, we got several avenues that we can drive down, and we're going to have to be flexible in how we approach all this. However, we also need to let the field know on which field they're playing, and not just keep them randomly going in different directions, expecting some direction. At some point, let's give them direction. If we have to change the direction, we'll need to change the direction. But we're going to be legally required to do so, but work within the frameworks in which we have currently. Is that understanding somewhat correct, Alicia?
President Arducci, members of the board, that is correct. I would also add that, yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And I do appreciate everybody's comments, because we all know that this is a very tough situation that everybody's in. The educators have been in, the administrators have been in, and ADE and our staff have been in, and the entire state. And so I'd like to caveat everything that we're doing, that everything's being done the best we can to make sure that things comply with the law, comply with our mandates, and also try to, accountability is very essential in what we're doing. And so with that, any further discussion regarding item 5E2? I think we're still on 5E2, correct? Yeah, 5E2.
Can I add one more comment, President?
You bet.
So at the risk of overusing my time, maybe I would like to propose that we at least have a month delay on this. I don't know that these aren't really critical items that can't be handled another time. But is it possible to try and get some direction on from the governor or some of the leadership in the legislature on this issue of whether or not we're going to have grades this fall? Just because I can just see the agenda next month and the following month as issues come up, we're going to continue to have things in the models that don't work anymore and trying to do some workarounds.
I think, Alicia, did you want to answer that, or you want me to try to provide a comment, or Cal?
You broke up a little bit. What was your question, President Narducci?
Oh, I with respect to Member Welburn's point, I was just wondering if we wanted to discuss that any further with respect to a potential hold on moving forward with 5E2 based on trying to get some information from the legislature or governor's office, et cetera, which I don't see. Patricia, my own view is I don't see that happening. Legislature's of course not in session, for one. For two, in the election process, not much is going to change in the next month. And there's also breaks coming up amongst a lot of schools still for fall break. So that's going to take a lot of the field away for a week or two as well. So I don't see much changing in the next month before our next meeting. Cal?
President Narducci, Member Wellborn, members of the board, I just want to state that I strongly support Member Wellborn's position that we as a board should take some kind of proactive or make some kind of proactive statement regarding accountability. There was and I've been waiting with making my comment till we got to the next item, but let me jump in here since this has come up. There was a public comment that we should eliminate standardized testing, and that certainly there is there's many people in the public in regards to what's happening with COVID who want to go all the way to just doing away with testing and accountability. And personally, I feel very, very strongly that it would be legitimate and appropriate for the board to make a strong statement to the effect that we must hold on to the collection and the use of data, whether we like it or we don't like it. Some of us, for example, we were talking before the meeting started about our own medical issues. And so we get tests taken and we don't necessarily want to see the results, or the results may reflect negatively on us, but we certainly would not want to eliminate that data or not look at that data. So I feel very strongly we need to continue on with testing. We need to continue on with self-reporting data. And then I feel almost as strongly that we should not be assigning grades, that grades should not be assigned this year. And I hear very loud and clear that right now that is the law. So we probably should be making these adjustments. That's appropriate to do. But I think it's also appropriate that we make a statement, and maybe we can work on doing that at the next meeting, that we, because of the conditions And because so many things are out of the control of individual schools in regards to test results, that we take a position against the use of assignment of grades this year. So in other words, to kind of sum up, that instead of saying, let's just do away with accountability this year, or saying, no, let's just march forward as if nothing had happened, let's thread the needle and say, we have to have this data. We need it to see just how much of a negative impact COVID had on student performance, and we need it as a baseline for future years. But we recognize that so much what has occurred is outside of the control of individual schools. So let's not pound on schools for things they had no control over and give them a bad grade because as mentioned earlier, students had to stay home or work in order to help their family.
You know, Cal, I agree. I can't disagree with anything that's been said by anybody. So I agree with everything, because those concerns and the processes mentioned are absolutely right on, and spot on. And I understand that we're talking about schools here, and I understand we're talking about the grade systems for the schools. What I'm also noticing, and I've seen this in students, is that even though we're concentrating here on not grading the schools, students who were straight A students, and I'm just throwing this out there and probably has nothing to do with this agenda item except that it comes down to accountability, is that students who have been straight A students their entire careers, who have been taught on the virtual system now, have been receiving not straight A's. And you know, and I don't know if that goes into the processes that have been applied by the schools, and you know, allowing the or how they adopted the virtual systems or whatever. But that's another aspect where the data collection is going to be useful. I mean, I'm supporting what you said. The data collection is going to be useful to see what systems we threw into place maybe not be adequate for, you know, future uses and things. And we also don't want, I'm hoping that just because we change the systems, it's not harmful to that child as they're moving forward in the education system as well. So we'll have to make sure that, I mean, data is important. Data is really important, regardless of what field we're in, and especially in this field. With that, I'm going to move, Armando. You're still muted.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was going to also, like Cal, wait till the next, but now's the time, I guess, to deal with it. And you know, I think he's right. I think you move ahead. You want to collect the data. It's really important to collect the data. But at the same time, you know, it's what are you going to do with the data? I mean, if you're going to assign grades with it, I think that's foolish, because if anything, at the end of all this, you can also, it's possible create a backlash against accountability, because accountability it has to measure something, you know, for it to be valid, it has to measure instruction. And the very strong argument during this time is all it will measure is how did you deal with fear. And, you know, you have to deal with the fear of your teachers, of the people who come in and they're going to instruct. And if you do something that does not take that into consideration, they're not going to be at their best, because they're going to be unhappy. If you force teachers to come in without buy-in, you're not going to get good academic results, because you didn't get buy-in from teachers. And that's really, really important. The fear that they have of getting sick. Secondly, you got to deal with the fear of parents. You know, they're sending their kids to school and how they feel. And if you don't deal with that, they send their kids some other school. And then you have also, you know, how do you deal with the fear of children? And I would argue that this year, all the tests are going to measure is how did you deal with fear? How did you manage that? And, you know, how did you try to have education occur in this environment where people are afraid, and you just hear so many different things of how do you deal with Corona? Is this true? Is it not true? And you just try to listen to as many folks as you can, listen to your people, listen, and then you come to an agreement, but you better have a lot of buy-in from all the people, all the stakeholders. And what I don't want to create also is an environment where accountability it's not valid anymore because we didn't make the adjustment. And part of being wise, I think, sometimes is you've got tests, but when it is going to measure. It's going to measure the same thing every year. Then people have confidence in it. When you have a pandemic and you're not sure that it's going to measure instruction, then it's best to wait. Otherwise, people will then say the system is not about accountability anymore. And in the future, you run the risk of not having schools accountable. And I don't want that. And I know a lot of people don't want that. So thank you.
Thank you, Armando. Appreciate it. All righty. So with respect to item 5E2, and a lot of discussion we have actually related to 5E3 as well and the entire accountability. But I'm going to go forward and add, do I have a motion to approve the use of the 95% tested threshold for the 2021 accountability science bonus point for both 9 through 12 traditional model and the K through 8 traditional model?
So move.
I have a motion by Cal. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by member Mack. Thank you. Please unmute. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 All against?
Nay.
I have a nay from member Wellborn and a nay from member Ruiz. Any other nays? Alicia?
Yes, President Narducci.
So we have 2 nays. I don't know
yes.
how many members are actually on.
The vote is 7-2, so the motion passes. Member
Okay.
Robbins dropped off earlier.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. The motion passes, and that was absolutely a fantastic discussion that we need to take into consideration all those aspects as we move along. I'm going to offer this up. Let's do item 5E3, and for 5E3, let's take for granted that everything that we've discussed so far applies to 5E3. So after 5E3 is discussed, we'll take a 7-minute break, Alicia, if that's okay with our agenda. Do we have anybody else leaving that will leave us without a quorum anytime soon? No, not what we're aware of. Okay, fantastic. So why don't we move on to 5E3, assume that everything that was said so far will apply to 5E3. Alicia, you can go forward with any discussion on that item, and then we'll comment as needed, and then we'll move on to break.
So President Narducci, did you want David from the department to present on this item?
Please.
Okay. So David from the department will present. He is the new research and statistical analysis director for the department.
Alicia, this is Wendy. David and I will be presenting together. I'll tee it off and then he'll join in.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
Prior to getting into the presentation, though, I do want the board members to know, based upon that last discussion, board staff would be more than willing to schedule a special meeting, potentially after the October meeting, because the October meeting is a very heavy meeting with closing multiple rules, and we have multiple video presentations for the Holocaust rule closure. So
well, Alicia, why don't we do this? Alicia, why don't we do this? Why don't we take for granted that we are, let's see how much progress we can make and then take for granted that we will hold a special meeting in November. And we'll
Okay.
pick a date that's kind of suitable for us. We can do that by Zoom. This way no one has to travel as needed. And we'll go from there.
Perfect. Sounds.
Thanks.
Wendy and David, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, and members, thank you so much for teeing up our third item that we have on the agenda. And if we can go to the next slide. So much like our schools, accountability has been busy beginning as early as April of last year. We have been attending national calls related not only to state accountability, but also federal accountability. The subject expert have been attending with me and independently so that we could attend as many meetings as possible. Dr. Shawain Tan has been working with Dr. Biedenbender as early as April, looking at how we would look at growth. So as you can see in the document that we provided you, which is quite lengthy, we have been working and moving along. We have been spending time on evaluating the pandemic impact, what we are currently seeing, what we need to model, and what we need to bring to you. So next slide, please. So this is the big question of all the meetings that we've been attending. This is the question that comes to light that they're telling each state to ask. Is the accountability model able to provide the data and serve the purpose for which it was originally developed? And when you think about that, you're going to think, how do I have to answer that? And everybody suggested, as we started on our own, is an early review of all the data components that you have in your accountability system. And as you're reviewing that data, you're asking yourself, does these potential changes or the impact to the data change the data in a way that it's no longer serving the purpose for which it was originally intended for? And then you have the next question. What else do you need to be able to make a data-driven decision regarding accountability? So based on that, we brought all three technical advisory committees and participated in an initial review of all the components together. So we had the AOI, the traditional ATAC, and the alternative ATAC, and all three groups worked over 2 days through a process that we learned through CCSSO. And as we know that a lot of people didn't have a chance to review those documents, we want to give you a high level of what we went through. And at this time, I was glad to introduce him. Alicia, thank you for introducing him. I would like to turn it over to Dr. David Selby, and he is our accountability director.
Thank you, Mrs. Davey. Thank you, President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. Next slide, please. The ability to make valid comparisons between data collected on different subjects at different times is fundamental to data analysis and evaluation. Data quality assesses the validity of those comparisons by determining if the measures have the same meaning in the current environment as they did in the past. We do this by determining what is different and what is the same about a measure and answer the question, is it possible to collect data in the same way on the same population as we have in the past? And if the answer is no, assessing to what extent do we have to change our data collection methods to adapt to a new environment. Basically, we're seeking to understand the extent to which COVID-19 has disrupted our ability to collect data, perform analysis, and make valid comparisons. Next slide, please. The Center of Assessment provides 4 criteria for assessing data quality: completeness, to what extent are elements of the data missing; consistency, were the data properties altered; impact, is it likely data values will substantially change; and practicality, is it feasible or reasonable to collect data and collect and report the data. Next slide, please. So I want to drill down into each of these criteria. Completeness. Satisfying the completeness criteria required us to assess if there's large sections of student data that was likely to be missing, or likely to be missing, and to understand if students were equally likely to be missing their data, or if there was some underlying reason particular groups of students might be missing data. Consistency. The question of consistency is whether the calculations of each A through F component will be the same, or if we need to change the way measures are calculated. The other part of the consistency criteria is anticipating if the testing environment will be the same or if it will change. For instance, EL testing has to be done in person, which is very difficult for schools right now. And we need to consider if accommodations schools make to address this challenge may disrupt the consistency of the EL measures. Impact. I want to take a moment and discuss impact in depth, because measuring the impact of COVID-19 is one of the most important things we could analyze with our data. From an analytic standpoint, measuring the impact of an outside event like COVID-19 is straightforward. It requires us to have data that predates COVID-19, which we have, and to collect data that postdates COVID-19, which we anticipate the gathering. However, assessing the impact of COVID-19 on the data quality of our measures is a different exercise entirely than measuring the impact of COVID-19 on our students and schools. When assessing data quality, we have to consider if it is advisable to disregard the effects of outside events, or if outside events have changed the underlying social reality, experience, or environment. And just as COVID-19 has disrupted our daily lives, it has also disrupted the data quality of almost every measure that is used for A through F. Therefore, COVID-19 impacts the data quality of most of our measures, meaning that it has changed what the components measure and mean. Assessing data quality of our measures is what allows us to measure the impact of COVID-19, because it allows us to understand how the measures have changed or what changes need to be done so that we can have a valid comparison after the fact. And practicality. The practicality criteria is asking whether data can be collected at all. And the good news is that we can collect data on all of our measures. But if new measures were to be designed, we would need to assess if it is possible to collect the data without putting too much of a burden on any one party or entity. Next slide, please. This slide shows how the criteria fit into a framework that we use to evaluate each measure. The top picture is the Center of Assessment's approach, which included a 3-point scale. We expanded their approach to a 5-point scale based on how many criteria were satisfied, where a red measure satisfied no criteria, a yellow measure satisfied 2, and a green measure satisfied all 4 criteria. And it should be noted that we took a binary approach to evaluating these criteria, meaning we didn't try to evaluate the size of COVID-19's threat to any particular criteria, but only acknowledge that a concern existed. Next slide, please. So I want to take a moment to address the 28-page report that was provided with today's materials. The report is not meant to be read cover to cover, as riveting as that may be. Instead, the report provides a summary of our findings, which is that all components are available for fiscal year 21, but most of them had data quality concerns ranging from the minor to the major. It also provides an in-depth explanation of data quality and an overview of our methodology, which was similar to what I discussed today. Then we have an in-depth breakdown of each of the components of A through F, discussing how we analyze the components' data quality, what work we still need to do, and any changes or modifications that we are considering suggesting, and any qualifying statements or assumptions that we had to make about the components. Finally, we rate each component and justify our explain our justification so that a reader who's interested in a particular component can turn to the relevant page and quickly understand our data quality concerns. Thank you for your time. I now turn it back to Mrs. Davey, who will provide a high-level overview of each model.
Thank you, David. Okay, so what I'm going to show you next is more of a visual. So we took all those components in that 28-page and we made it synopsis here. So we don't want to go through everything unless you guys have particular questions. I want to lay the foundation when you look at the testing. This is under, like I said, in that document, we talk about assumption that all the kids would be back in school, all the kids will be testing, and we'll be reading, well, everybody will be there to test. That was the qualifier. If that changes, our proficiency on our state test will no longer be lying. So at this point in time, that is the assumption we are making on proficiency on the state assessments. So in front of you, you have the K-8 model, and you can see other than the lime green for proficiency, the rest of the items are yellow or orange. And now we're going to move to 912. Same thing here with the exception of graduation. So as you know, we don't publish any information on graduation until a year in lag. However, we did take a preliminary look at fiscal year 20 graduation. So these kids that just graduated. At this point, we really are not seeing any huge impact to the graduating class of 20. These are preliminary numbers. Just like proficiency could change, graduation would change as we move through the year and everybody gets everything updated. So that is a look at what we're looking at. Again, graduation and proficiency aside, most of our data components, we do have some concerns that we need to address and discuss. And then as we move to the alternative model, they do have the two components of graduation. So they do have the green, and again, the proficiency is there. And then again, the yellows and the oranges are there. In addition to these three models and the color coding we have there, we want to bring a couple other things that don't apply just so easily to a component on the next slide. So one thing we've had lots of discussions on and we've always talked about, because it's always been a challenge, is those co-enrolled students. So one of the things we know right now is we are having some mobility. Kids are choosing to take online classes and it's not always with their district. So one of the things we will have to be looking at very carefully as soon as we're able to is how much has that changed? Do we have a lot of kids that are at an AOI and a brick and mortar? And is it different than it's been in years in past? Because if it is, we're going to have to take that into consideration as we move forward. We also know that we have some schools that have kids in their system that are food service only, that they're trying to help their community. So we haven't had time yet, but we're going to look at those data points to make sure those kids would never get pulled into any type of accountability or reporting. We know there's an impact to FAE, whether it's full academic year for any of our kids under any of the circumstances, or even our full year of a Zella FAE is highly impacted. Everybody was starting at different times. In our business rules, we have specific dates that are all getting pushed back. So that whole impact of FAE is going to have to be looked at. We are initially hypothesizing, but we're pretty sure that there will be a decrease in the available of FAE students just because of some of the increased mobility that we're seeing. We also know that our cut scores will have to be trashed and we will have to start from scratch. So anything like that, we would want to start from scratch. And one other thing before we go to the next slide, I just want to reiterate in all these meetings that we're having, and you guys have already pretty much spoken to it, that right now, all the experts, all the states realize that outside of accountability, so taking accountability, high stakes accountability off the table, the ability to have these data points being collected so that we can provide information to stakeholders in schools on where they are compared to their peers or where they are compared to their schools, who might be doing a better job is so essential. So regardless of what we do for accountability A through F, we know as an accountability department that we will monitor these variables and keep that moving forward so that we can bring the best data to you for your consideration and anybody else that needs it for decision making. Next slide. So at this time, my department, everybody's there and they're ready to either let David know or myself know if you have a question, if we can answer it right away, but we stand for any questions and next steps.
Thank you, David and Wendy. Really appreciate it. Again, hard work and glad you guys are undertaking it in conjunction with everyone else who's helping. I am going to open it up for further questions. Again, taking into consideration everything that's already said. And who would like to go first?
I'd like to make just a general comment.
Please, Cal.
Ducci, members of the board. You know, as a board member, I certainly am concerned about data quality. And so I appreciate the work that's been done and is continuing to be done by ADE staff and also by the various committees. But I just want to make the comment that beyond data quality, as a board member, I'm also very concerned about two other issues in regards to accountability. Number one, are we using measures that schools have a reasonable amount of control over? So, and this relates to comments that were made previously. Right now with COVID, some of the measures, the amount of control that schools have over them have decreased as students have been held out of school for other reasons. And so quality of self-reported data, well, so their self-reported data is likely less has a lower quality than some of the other data, but it is critically important. And let me just use the example of FAFSA. We know that FAFSA completion is directly related to enrollment in post-secondary education. And so continuing to use that data, even though the quality of it might not be as strong as other quality as other data points, is important. So one, are we using measures that schools have some control over? And schools can do things to increase a FAFSA completion. And then second, closely related to that is, what are we incentivizing? So we want to have quality data, but always, always, always we want to think about what are we encouraging schools to do. And again, I'll go back to the FAFSA data point. When we collect that data, we are incentivizing schools to work with kids to get FAFSA completed, which we know is directly related to getting more students going into post-secondary education. So again, just summary, quality is critically important. We should be working on it. We should be talking about it, but we cannot forget that we also need to use data that schools have some control over, number one. And number two, we have to always be conscious of what is it that we are incentivizing.
Thank you, Cal. Appreciate those
President
comments. Yes, Member Mack. Dr. Mack.
President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. I just want to echo some of the points raised earlier, particularly that high concerns about the data quality on many of these. And a lot of things are honestly out of our control and out of the school's control. Things like chronic absenteeism. Like as soon as a child has a sore throat, we have to send them home and they have to stay home for 10 days. And that adds up very quickly, whether or not that is COVID related. We don't know, but they're out for 10 days. So these are things like when you hit the boots on the ground, these are the realities we're dealing with. So I think I have a lot of concerns about the data quality, but on the same time, understanding the need that we need to continue to collect that data, definitely to inform and provide as much information as possible, but keeping it as, rigorous, as possible as well. That actually means something. And to the other point regarding, something, and I do also support just moving multiple pathways forward. I think as our executive director stated earlier. So if we're taking the science one as an example, the alternative would have been to keep it as it was and basically testing schools on a field test, which with brand new standards. So given those two options, I think we still have to move forward and make the best decision we can under the rules of the game we're playing right now. And then understanding that the assumption that all of this plays out in is that kids are going to be taking the test in the spring, that somehow this is all going to, and that's a big assumption at this point to be making. So I think we just have to be cautious and just, I really appreciate that information. That was an amazing packet of information just to go through. There's a lot of paths forward to investigate, and I'm just waiting for more information, particularly some of the points that were mentioned, some of the possibilities to make it more higher quality. So thank you for all the work you're doing. This is, unprecedented. And I think the collaboration that's happening with our state and other states is incredible. So I think it's going to lead us to a good place. So hopefully the best that we can under the circumstances, I should say.
Thank you, Member Mack. And I just want to thank you for all the committees that you've been appointed to and that you're serving on as well, that bring us to a better place with knowledge as we're moving along as well. So thank you, Member Mack.
Thank you, President Arducci.
President Arducci.
Yes, whoever's speaking.
Oh, this is Alicia. I believe
Okay.
Member had a comment. I just didn't want you to miss him.
Go for it.
Okay, thank you. I had a question. One of the things that I just have been thinking about is, before we had, the rules were the same when we measured things. And that is, the one thing you count on that was equal is the state mandated, you had X number of days of of in-person instruction. You know, you have to have X number of days of in-person instruction, and that changed this year. And now an option was given. It's no longer where you have to have an X number of days of in-person instruction. You now have 3 different options that you can pick, but nobody's going to have what they had last year. You know, nobody's going to have X number of in-person instruction. You're now going to have you have hybrids, you have remote learning, and then you do have in-person instruction, but it's not going to be the same as it was last year. And every district is going to have different number of days of in-person instruction. And then the question would be, so is there one model that's better than the other? And then if one model is inferior to the other, and you have schools that have to pick that model for a multitude of different reasons, what I mentioned before, you have to manage the environment in which you're in. You have to take in consideration all the stakeholders, and the stakeholders in one community may decide they don't want that number of in-person instruction. They want something different. And so then you have all these different schools. How do you make sure that it's going to be valid at the end?
You know, Member Ruiz, again, I am so glad we serve on this board with all people who come in with all these perspectives and knowledge, because you've reiterated a lot of things that all of you have reiterated a lot of things that I've been thinking as well. And, you know, one thing that resonates with me too is Member Mack's comments regarding, you know, somebody comes to school with sniffles and a cough, sore throat, they have to go home, and, you know, for a number of days, and that qualifies potentially under the rules as chronic absence because of the number they have to be home. I mean, all that data, all the data that we're intaking has to be modified and somehow assessed with the other factors that have applied throughout all of this. Yeah, I mean, it all resonates accurate to me outside the education field, but in business, you know, of different types, that all those factors need to be considered. And, you know, it's, I don't know what kind of models can be further developed or factors that can be modified that we then consider. But I think sticking true to what we agree with, I think, is that the data needs to be collected. And then we also have to assess as we're going along all the various factors that should be fairly and justifiably applied to the factors, applied to the data in order to come out with a number that makes any sense in the long run, regardless of what administration we're under, et cetera. It just needs to be fair. It needs to be accurate. It needs to be equitable. And the process that we come out with needs to demonstrate that the appreciation for all of the impacts that our education system has been and continues to go through as a result of COVID-19, which is a monumental task, monumental. So any other discussion or comments for? Yes.
Can I jump in? Thank you.
Oh, Superintendent Huffman, there we go.
Thank you, board members. Yeah, I really appreciate this conversation and the comments that have been made so far. And I wanted to first say thank you to Wendy and David for working at the national level, because I think it's important for us to remember that Arizona is not alone in grappling with these challenges and obstacles. And so I think it's really important, and we're seeing this across ADE, having our teams work at the national level with partners so that we are having all, you know, making sure again that we're keeping our eyes and ears open to ideas and being creative and innovative to solve these problems. And specifically to this presentation, I'm a bit of a data nerd, so I really appreciated that this was getting into the weeds and looking at the different parts of the accountability system, and just at least asking those questions of how reliable, how valid are these data? And we absolutely need to be asking those questions. And I think it ties in directly to the prior conversation we were having around how are we using these data, but also thinking about what does this mean for the future of our accountability system. And we can't just go to the legislature and say, this isn't going to work. We need to have a good rationale and a good reason for why this is problematic and why we need to be looking at it in a broader, more comprehensive way, because as we've all said, the data is super important, and I have such high concerns about the inequities across our state right now in terms of access to education. And that's back in the spring and continuing on into this school year. Such high concerns around this. So we do need data, but how we're using the data and what that means for our schools and the stress and pressure they're under to serve their communities is the other really important part of this conversation. So I just want to say thanks to everyone for this really thoughtful conversation.
Thank you, Superintendent Hoffman.
President Narducci, I'd like to make a comment.
You bet, Member Welborn.
Thank you. Wendy and David, I want to thank you very much for your work on this, because it does provide the detail, professionalism, and knowledge behind really what the issues are and what the challenges are of trying to have valid data that can be used for a model. And clearly we got huge challenges in front of us. So thank you for that. I understand that this agenda item did ask for some input on how you guys might move forward. And to that, I wanted to just share a perspective from the medical community. And I'm party to that because my husband sits on the board of Honor Health. And so we're very clued into what the medical community is considering. They would not expect COVID to be gone by next spring. In fact, their expectation, it will continue to have it in hotspots from time to time. And then a vaccine, even though a vaccine might be announced and ready, it's not going to be distributed to the general public. It'll take a year or more for that to happen, just because it just takes so long and so difficult to ramp up, much less there may well be a significant portion of the population that doesn't want to take the vaccine. So I think it's fair to believe that next spring, we may well not have all the kids to be tested on site at school. And so if we, is it possible, my question would be, is it possible going forward, assuming we have a different assumption for your work, and the other assumption is we may not be able to get all the kids on site in school, and balance that with the need that we would like to have baseline data to help us move forward. Is there some other way we can do a test or utilize the data from this test? Are there other ways that we can do it so there is some valid data and it's usable going forward? And I don't expect an answer now, but I'm just saying, can we explore the other scenario for an assumption, and what is possible to do and learn from?
I assume that would be something for us to consider as we move along. Is that correct, Patricia?
Well, I'm really looking forward toward the data analytical people, because they work really well in establishing the rules for what makes data valid. And if we were to say right now, we cannot have a test where 100% of our kids are going to come into classroom and take this test like we normally do in April. So is there a way? So what would be our options given that? Can we just test try and test those who do show up in the classroom? What does that mean? Or if we try and have two sets of data, which is the data that comes from kids that come into the classroom versus some kids that might take a test remotely. I'm just trying to roll the movie forward a little bit about what might be real if we can't have everybody coming into school to take the test, or are there things that we could be doing to thinking about for schools on how we could ensure that that we do kids come in to take a test? I mean, is there another way to do it than we traditionally have done it, so we can try and get some valid data moving forward?
So if I
have I confused you?
No. I think I understand the question, but I think from David and Wendy's perspective, I think what's being requested is possibly a discussion as to alternatives or approaches to the testing. I don't think that any students I don't think there's been any exception for students that are working virtually or in brick and mortar or the hybrid yet. So I don't think we're working under a different system than we have worked with in the past for exceptions from testing. But going to Patricia's presentation, is this something that Wendy and David, we should consider and then get some further feedback from you guys as we move along in the next several weeks? Or are you ready to have a discussion now on it? Or anybody?
President Narducci, Member Wellborn, Superintendent Hoffman, and other members, ADE will bring to you the conversations that we are having. So we are working with groups such as ASU, Helios, NORC, regarding the COVID impact. So any of those options that Member Wellborn is talking about, we are going to be collecting those. And as soon as they're available, we will bring them back to the board.
And if I may, just
Dr. Selby, sorry.
Thank you, President Narducci, Member Wellborn, for your comment or question. The initial concern that we have to consider from a data perspective is if we were to test students just as they show up to come into the classroom, we need to have to ensure that those students are representative of our whole population of students and not just a selection of students who are able to make it to the classroom. So that's the first concern. The other concern is if we were to open up testing to virtual, and of course we'd have to explore those options, exactly what that would look like, is that would fundamentally change the testing environment from being in the controlled environment in the classroom to a more flexible online environment, which we would have to consider as we explore other options and bring them to the board for your decision.
Appreciate that very much.
President Narducci, this is Alicia.
Yes.
President Narducci, members of the board, I do just want to say that Member Mack has to jump off in about 20 minutes. And I think with Member Wellborn's comments and Wendy and Dr. Selby's comments, what we could do is for that special meeting, maybe the first agenda item is that the board should have a discussion around their statement around accountability, their accountability statement for the 2021 school year. And then from that statement, Wendy and her team can bring other options of data collection to the board to have conversations around.
Perfect plan. With that, we'll say thank you to everybody regarding item 5E3 and very much appreciate everything and your attendance. And we'll move on to item 6 of the agenda. With Member Mack's departure in 20 minutes, I think since item 6 is, we're going to move on, we're just going to call and then dismiss. Are we still going to have a quorum?
Yes, President Narducci will still have a quorum when Member Mack, Dr. Mack leaves.
Okay, so then let's do this. Why don't we move on to item 6? We'll take a 5-minute break and then come back for item 7 if that works for everybody. Item 6, this is the time that the State Board of Education is convening as the Arizona State Board for Vocational and Technological Education. At this time, no agenda items have been submitted for this board to consider under this agenda item. So therefore, with that, we'll move on to item 7 right after a 5-minute break. And it is 12:58. Let's be back a little bit before 1:05. Thank you.
Thank you.
And keep everything on. Don't shut off. Just shut your video off and mute. Thank you.
President Narducci, once you call the meeting back to order, if you can have all the board members turn their cameras on so we can ensure quorum.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Director Williams. The meeting has been called back to order at 1:06. Could all the board members put their cameras on so we can make sure you're there? Make sure we have a quorum. Are we good, Alicia?
Yes, sir. We have 9 members.
Fantastic. I'm just disappearing because I dropped something. There we go. I'm back. With that, we will move on to item 7, which is our call to the public. Director Williams.
President Narducci, for the item 7 call to the public, we do not have any requests to speak. However, we have 2 requests to speak for number 9.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 8, which is our consent agenda for certification enforcement actions. I would like to take this item number 8 in one motion. Do I have a motion to approve items 8A1 through 8A4?
So moved.
I have a motion by Cal and a second by member Mack. Sorry, do I have a second by member Mack?
Yes, second.
Thank you. So we have a first and a second. Please unmute. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Item 8 passes. We'll move on to item 9, a call to the public. This is the time for the public to comment on items on the general session of the certification enforcement actions. I believe we have 2 comments.
That is correct. First up, we have Nicole Lopez, followed by Alex Hernandez. Nicole. Nicole, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay. I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear and see you. You may begin.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the board. I appreciate the time to speak with you regarding Mr. Alexander Hernandez. We respectfully request that the board follow the committee's recommendation of the reprimand through the letter of censure and an ethics class for the following reasons. One is that Mr. Hernandez testified at the hearing in front of the committee and he took responsibility. He did testify that he called students baby or honey as a term of endearment with absolutely no malicious intent. More specifically, he testified that he is 63 years old and those names are simply how his generation refers to young persons. The committee also heard testimony from Miss Elizabeth Field that she heard Ms. Hernandez use those names with her own daughter and had no issues with it, as she testified that he did not use it in a demeaning or derogatory way. The committee heard testimony that Mr. Hernandez returned to the classroom 1 week after the incident and continued teaching all but 2 students who wrote the statements and made these allegations against him. The district filed the letter of reprimand for Mr. Hernandez, and after the resolution of this incident for the remainder of the school year, Mr. Hernandez did not have any other issues with any other students or anything else related to these allegations. The committee did recognize that Mr. Hernandez learned from the experience and implemented the instructions he received from the district's letter of reprimand. Mr. Hernandez has had a teaching career of approximately 30 years, and he's never had any other disciplinary issues in his entire teaching career. He enjoys the teaching profession and giving back to the community. Based upon the evidence and testimony presented at the hearing and the committee's discussion and recommendation, Mr. Hernandez respectfully requests that the board follow the committee's recommendation and issue the letter of censure and require that Mr. Hernandez take an ethics class approved by the Board of Education. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Nicole, will your client be providing a comment as he's registered as well, but it says, well, my lawyer will speak to the issue?
No, he won't. He just wanted me to speak on his behalf.
Okay, thank you. President Narducci, that concludes item 9.
Very much. We'll move on to item number 10, which is our general session for certification enforcement actions. We will go one by one, and I'll just reference the item number, and then if anybody has a discussion for it, we'll do so. Otherwise, I'll call for a motion and a second.
Okay, and President Narducci, member Mack left at 1:09 p.m. So
Okay.
we now have 8 board members on. So because we are really close to that 7, 6, and 7, I will need mics muted and videos on when we go to do a voice vote, please.
Okay. Sounds good. So first item is item number 10A with respect to Mallory Ashley. Is there any discussion or questions regarding Mallory Ashley's case? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC and revoke any and all teaching certificates held by Mallory Ashley for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
I have a motion by member Baker. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by member Core. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. We'll move on to item 10B. This concerns Kyle Bradbury. Any discussion or questions regarding that case? Hearing none. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC and revoke any and all teaching certificates of Kyle Bradbury for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
I'll move.
Have a motion by member Broussard. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by member Burton. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Move on to item 10C regarding the certificate of Hans Peter Kohlhoff. Any questions regarding that case? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC and revoke any and all teaching certificates of Hans Peter Kohlhoff for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
I have a motion by member Core. Do I have a second by member Welborn?
Yes.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Move on to item 10D regarding the certificate or certificates of Elizabeth Rotz. Any questions regarding that case? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC and revoke any and all teaching certificates of Elizabeth Rotz for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
I have a motion by member Welborn. Do I have a second?
Second.
I think I'll take the second from member Broussard. Is that correct?
Sure, yep.
Okay, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Move on to item 10E. This regards the case of Trevor Schenk. Any questions regarding that case? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC to revoke any and all teaching certificates of Trevor Shank for a period of 5 years, that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
I have a motion by member Broussard. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by member Baker. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Move on to item 10F. This regards the case of Jacobo Favela. Do we have any questions regarding that case? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendations of the PPAC and revoke any and all teaching certificates of Jacobo Favela for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
I have a motion by member Baker. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by member Burton. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Move on to item 10G. This regards the case of Justin Taplin. Any questions regarding that case? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC and revoke any and all teaching certificates of Justin Taplin for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
I have a motion by member Baker.
Second.
I have a second by member Core. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Move on to item 10H. This regards the case of Mackenzie Thompson. Any questions regarding that case? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC and revoke any and all certificates held by Mackenzie Thompson for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
I'll go with a motion by member Welborn. And do I have a second by member Core?
Certainly do.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes. We'll move on to item 10I regarding the case of Alexander Hernandez II. Any questions regarding that case? Hearing none. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC and issue a letter of censure to Alexander Hernandez II with the conditions of completion of classroom management course of ethics, with the completion of classroom management course or ethics course within 12 months of acceptance, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
I have a motion by member Burton. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by member Baker. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Thank you very much. That concludes agenda item number 10. We will move on to agenda item number 11, summary of current events, future meeting dates, and items for future agendas, which I will turn over to Director Williams.
Thank you, President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. Board staff will work on scheduling a special session for the board to discuss accountability and the board's statement or position on statewide accountability for the 2021 school year and potentially beyond. I'll invite the department with Wendy and David so they can go more in depth of the data that they've been working on at national levels. And then I do want to make the board aware that member Kay, although she had to sign off earlier today, did send me an email and stated that she would like some type of report from the Department of Education, and Superintendent Hoffman, I can work with the department on this behalf, but she would really like to look at the 2019-2020 Q1 attendance and enrollment rates versus the 2021 attendance and enrollment rates. And she has a couple other things that I'll work with your staff on, but I do think that would be important for the board to look at, especially if we are hearing that enrollment rates are down across the board. That could tell us that we're missing students within the state.
Yeah, and thank you, Alicia. And then first, let me give a big thanks to everybody who participated in today's meeting. It took a lot of time and effort, and we appreciate that greatly, including board members as well as everybody from ADE and the community that has been involved. I think from the meetings we are all very interested in and concerned about how we move forward with those procedures that you just talked about, Alicia. And I request all board members to please reach out to Alicia with any input you want her to have directly with the people working on it between her staff as well as ADE, so that when we get back together in the next few weeks, we are more in tune with what's been asked and we have more questions answered, and then we can move forward. But I also have to say I enjoyed everybody's input today and the discussions that we had, because it shows that we're thinking about all this stuff that impacts our state and all of our kids and teachers and all the work that is going into it all. So I really thank everybody for that. Alicia, anything else on events, summaries, or anything of that nature?
Summary of current events. We're going to have our first round of interviews for our new project director of education savings or empowerment scholarship accounts. Sorry, I always use the wrong terminology when I'm tired. It's been a long day. Interviews this week for that individual, and then hopefully they'll probably have to give a 2-week or 4-week notice for their former position, and then we'll have them in hopefully prior to November. So I'll introduce them to all of the members so that you know who our new staffer is. As always, board staff is available to you. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns that you would like us to take a look at, please feel free to reach out to myself and we'll do that for you.
Thank you. Member Burton?
Yes, I have a future agenda item so last month our board members received a letter from AFR Arizona announcing their recent expansion and innovation fund grant recipients. And as a reminder, those grants were funded by a portion of the governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, or GEARS fund. So I'd like to ask board staff to reach out to AFR Arizona, and I'm thinking this would probably be something for a December agenda item, but to provide sort of just a brief presentation and to spotlight some of the work of these grants. This is some of the innovative things that are going on in response to COVID, and I'm hearing little tidbits, and I think it'd be worthwhile for the board to hear some positive news, some good things that are going on. So my request would be that for the December meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Burton. Anything else? Hearing none. I forget, do I need a motion to adjourn? Okay. Hearing none, I'll move on my own accord that we end the meeting. It's no motion. Thank you very much. We appreciate everybody's time and look forward to seeing everybody soon. Thank you.
Nicely done, Luke. Nicely done.
Thank you.
It's